uses as appropriate and approved in certain zones, subject to meeting specified requirements. This is from state code. Conditional use shall be approved if reasonable conditions are proposed or can be imposed to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. To reasonably mitigate anticipated detrimental effects does not require elimination of the detrimental effects. And then finally, a land use authority's decision to approve or deny a conditional use is an administrative land use decision. It's not subject to a public hearing like a legislative action, but you are free to accept public comment at your discretion. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So more specifically on the two conditional uses that are the subject of our first two applications. In 2016, Snowbird obtained a conditional use permit for accessory ski lifts and associated mountain resort facilities. And those approvals generally included to replace or realign the existing Mineral Basin Express lift, a proposed ski patrol facility on Hidden Peak, a proposed lift equipment facility, lift operator shelter in Mineral Basin, proposed avalanche control devices, both in Mineral Basin and Mary Ellen Gulch, proposed Mary Ellen lift in Mary Ellen Gulch, proposed Sunday saddle lift in Mary Ellen Gulch, and proposed warming huts, one near the Mary Ellen lift and one near the Sunday saddle lift. This conditional use went through 3 separate meetings with much public input and comment. And then after those meetings, the conditional use was approved on April 7th, 2016, subject to 20 conditions. Copies of that action report that identifies that action and those conditions were included in your packet. And those conditions, as we just discussed, were to help mitigate reasonably anticipated detrimental effects. Some of those conditions address the following: that the property be identified as a Utah County assessed parcel or parcels. Just a little background, that Snowbird owns the property, but they're patented mining claims, which are centrally assessed by the state tax commission. And patented mining claims convey certain surface rights. And as once a surface right is utilized or a structure is built on the surface, then for the county to assess that as a county assessed parcel, it would need to be converted into a county parcel through the creation of a legal description and a deed. So that was a condition of the approval. An extensive water quality monitoring plan, which required regular ongoing water quality monitoring prior to construction to establish a baseline during construction and post-construction. Size limits on the proposed structures. Prior to construction, geologic assessments for proposed towers and structures to ensure no impact or any mine waste, dump piles, or subsurface mine shafts, tunnels, or other workings are disturbed. Construction, operation, and maintenance of the approved conditional use was not to directly disturb mine tailings. And then these aren't all the conditions, these are just kind of a summary. The original termination date, and that date is the date to obtain a permit pursuant to an approved conditional use, was set as April 7th, 2020. And I'll kind of explain the nature of that termination date here in a second. And part of that was to account for the requirement to establish a baseline of water quality over a certain period of time, several years. So there was no ability to get a permit prior to that to establish that baseline. And then Appeal 1553 is associated with this. This is specific to the actual height of the support towers for the ski lifts. At the time, the ordinance allowed an unoccupied structure to be built up to 40 feet. Above 40 feet required a approval of a conditional use. So the proposed lifts had several support towers that were over that 40 feet. And so it necessitated an additional conditional use. And that was approved on the same date with several conditions. One was that no tower was to exceed 75 feet. Another condition was that the lifts and towers were to comply with the U.S. Forest Service Built Environment Image Guide. So that gets us to those two approvals. In 2019, the applicant came in and asked for an extension of that original approval of their termination date to obtain a permit. The land use ordinance sets the termination date as 1 year, but allows the board or a commission to establish a different termination date to ensure substantial justice can be met. So as you recall, the original approval required the applicant to do some baseline testing over a period of years, so they needed to extend that original termination date beyond that 1 year. The ordinance generally also allows the applicant to request an extension of the termination date after the initial meeting to ensure that they have substantial justice pursuant to their application. And so in 2019, the applicant utilized that provision and came to the Board of Adjustment to ask for an extension of 5 years to April 7th, 2025. And at the time, the applicant indicated the extension was needed to accommodate further analysis of adding lifts in Mary Ellen Gulch, explore additional environmental protection measures, and ensure a thoughtful implementation of potential ski resort infrastructure in the area. And that extension was approved, and that termination date was set as April 7th, 2025, which gets us to our current request. The applicant is now asking for an additional 5 years to April 7th, 2030. They have indicated several reasons necessitating this request, and those have been included in your application. The applicant's here, and I imagine we'll expand on the current request. They've also included some information in their application about the measures they've taken over the last 5 years, and I'll let them kind of expound on that. So just a couple reminders, and I'll finish up. This is not a rehearing of the original approval of the conditional uses, there's 2 of them, and or their conditions of approval. And then only factual matters related to the need of substantial justice necessitating this requested extension should be considered. Couple other things. So we talked about public comment a little bit. Conditional uses are an administrative land use decision. Do not require a public hearing. I know you've received emails. You haven't received emails that have been sent to our Planning Commission email regarding this item, including some requests to speak, which is at your discretion. You can decide to take public comments, but again, comments should be limited to the current request as was stated earlier. If you decide to accept public comments, which the Planning Commission has generally done on conditional uses, if people are wanting to talk, the Planning Commission has adopted a resolution for the comments that we've set some time. The Planning Commission has set time limit for individuals. Also, the provision if there's a spokesperson for a group that can articulate their group concerns, they have a little more time. And then also, comments shouldn't be repetitive. If someone agrees with what's been said earlier, they can say, I agree. And we've got 4 or 5 different applications tonight, and one of which is a public hearing, so we want to be respectful of other people's time. And I'm not sure how many people here are wishing to speak tonight, but keep that in mind as you consider allowing comments on these first 2 items. I have a time limit too, and so I hope I stuck underneath it. I think I did, but any questions?
I do have a question. Would you like to
No,
go
go
first?
ahead and go first.
Okay. In reading through the packet, substantial justice is a term that is used as something that we need to weigh heavily on, but I didn't quite see a connection to what would constitute substantial justice or what the parameters are for that. Is that something you can explain?
I can't, but the guy sitting next to me will.
It is an undefined term, and it's not a term that's been interpreted by our courts. So there really isn't a good answer. Here's kind of the way I knew this question was coming. Here's the way I would, if I were sitting in your chair, here's what I would do according to our law. The question is, years ago, a conditional use permit was granted by the Utah County Planning Commission. They believed it was a safe, legal, and desirable project to allow. Now the applicant is before you for an extension of that permit to bring it to fruition. Your decision is whether an extension is necessary to do substantial justice to this land use. It's already approved. It can be built, it can be done. The question is additional time necessary to give this project substantial justice? Now, that can be all kinds of different considerations, but that is, in essence, the decision you have to make tonight. Substantial justice is, they need more time. Why do you need more time? If that's a reasonable, fair request that would be just, then you would allow the extension. Does that help at all?
So it's more like, what would make this a fair and equitable consideration?
That's where the definitions and the case law go. It's just what's fair. Right.
Okay.
And my question actually kind of piggybacks on that, and that is why is there, I like to try to make things so that there's not as, at least amount of possibility of contention. So why is there an extension or a deadline put on these in the first place? I assume that it's there because if there was no deadline, somebody could 100 years later, after everybody's dead, nobody knows about it, could then keep trying to do it. I mean, but what's the purpose of the deadline kind of in the code?
Absolutely, I can handle that. One of the main reasons is to ensure that, if you recall, a conditional use is to, it's a use that's contemplated to be allowed, but you want to look at the specific conditions of the area to see what the impacts are going to be on the surrounding area. Potentially adverse impacts. And so part of having that deadline is to ensure that the circumstances or the neighborhood, whatever it may be, haven't significantly changed or changed much since the original approval, specifically related to the reasonable anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. Many areas, and again, this is applied everywhere where we approve conditional uses, and as you're aware, many areas in the county, especially out in the valley, or open space or agricultural areas that are subject to potential annexation and further development. And so, a conditional use that hasn't been utilized or come to fruition within a number of years, and all of a sudden the area around it gets built up, that could be a significant change from the original approval. And that you want to capture the conditions as closely as you can to that original approval. If the surrounding property or neighborhood is the same, a longer termination or those anticipated detrimental effects are similar or the same, a longer termination date is usually warranted. We have found that the 1 year is too short for anything, and so we're going to take it. We've been contemplating this independent of this application of taking a look at that and adjusting that. But also realizing we need to probably put a cap at some point on these extensions. At some point, it's time to revisit it. So, Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah.
So is it kind of like, as far as our decision tonight, no matter which way we go, they're still permitted and able to do what is in their conditional use permit. We're just looking at the timeline of when that would happen.
Yes, they are, but they do have a hard deadline of April 7th of this year to obtain a permit pursuant to their approved conditional use. So it would take some action for them to bring their conditional use to fruition fairly quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Additional questions?
So yeah, your next step will probably be the
applicant.
applicant, and then decide how you want to handle comment.
The applicant like to come up at this time?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dave Fields. I'm the president and general manager at Snowbird, and I appreciate this time to be before you this evening. I've been at Snowbird almost half of my life, and I take a lot of pride in working for this company. I also love the mountains, the canyons where I live and work, and the recreation that these great Utah lands provide both locals and visitors alike. I'm presenting tonight to ask for an extension to the previously unanimously approved conditional use permit for ski lifts, tower heights, and various associated mountain resort facilities on our private land in American Fork within Utah County. Do we have the next slide? This slide will, let's go back. This orients you to the area we're talking about. The valley on the right is Mineral Basin and the two existing chairlifts, and on the left is a picture of Mary Ellen Gulch and the two lifts we're proposing to put in there on our private land in the canyon. I would also like to clarify misunderstandings about Snowbird's ski lift plans. Mary Ellen Gulch is located approximately 6.5 miles from Tibble Fork Reservoir, as seen in this slide. Is it the next one? Snowbird's plans remain unchanged. Skiing in Mary Ellen Gulch will not be accessed through American Fork Canyon. Access will be exclusively from Little Cottonwood Canyon, and Snowbird remains committed to the intent and requirements outlined in the CE1 Critical Environmental Zone. We will continue to protect the canyon, mountain, riparian zone, and other areas of environmental concern in Utah County. Approval of these ski lifts and facilities follow the intent of the zoning requirements by protecting the sensitive environment of the area and conserving water recharge areas, vegetation, soils, wildlife, and other natural resources. When Snowbird requested the conditional use permit in 2016, the greatest concern was how building two ski lifts could impact water quality. We began immediately to work with stakeholders, including American Fork City, Utah County, Division of Water Quality, and the 3 irrigation companies with water shares in the American Fork drainage. For the past 9 years, Snowbird has sampled the water quality in Mary Ellen Gulch regularly, providing the samples to an independent lab and sent our test results to all the public entities. Snowbird also worked with Trout Unlimited, EPA, and the Utah Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining to voluntarily make significant improvements to the area surrounding the Live Yankee mine. Improvements include caution signage, fencing, and barriers discouraging and restricting recreation access to the waste rock piles. The riparian road was closed to motor vehicle access, resulting in notable water quality improvements. The area has also shown major vegetation growth, as seen in the next slide, further protecting the watershed. The results of these collective efforts are that water quality conditions have substantially improved. Snowbird continues to conduct water quality sampling quarterly, and per the conditional use permit agreement, we will continue to do so monthly during construction periods. Since the first extension was granted, the EPA and the Utah Division of Water Quality were able to complete their comprehensive environmental assessment of the Live Yankee mine. Both agencies concluded that the Live Yankee area does not pose imminent or immediate environmental danger. In 2022, DWQ discontinued the pursuit of a Utah Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. In 2021, the EPA also concluded that there was no need for other comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, commonly known as Superfund. This confirmed the EPA's 2002 No Further Remedial Action Plan determination. The discussions and results of these studies have influenced Snowbird's decisions on the best locations for placement of ski terrain and the loading and lift areas. Since the original application in 2016, Snowbird has continued to offer recreation to the public from American Fork Canyon. Snowbird is currently evaluating how to improve the connection between Mary Ellen Gulch and Mineral Basin. Snowbird's intent is to create an ATV loop that is accessible to the public in the summer months that connects these two areas, utilizing Snowbird's private roads and U.S. Forest Service land. This option will allow for a better recreation experience as well as better protecting and preserving of the natural environment. Snowbird is actively researching new and emerging lift technologies to ensure that the most efficient and modern lifts are constructed in Mary Ellen Gulch. Next slide, please. An example from Taos Ski Valley can be seen here. These new technologies include high-speed lift systems, digital control systems for safety and energy efficiency, and RFID gate technology. The purpose of providing these systems is to improve the ski experience while providing efficiency and sustainability. These technologies will influence the final placement of the lifts and location of the towers to reduce visual impairment. Snowbird has used these past 5 years to complete our pre-planning stages, including water quality sampling, assessments by state and federal agencies, create watershed improvements, and research lift efficiencies. Over the last 5 years, preparation and installation steps, over the next 5 years, preparation and installation steps are extensive. The process begins with site assessment, then we will select the best lift technology available, which has been improving over time. An engineering firm will be engaged to design the lifts, and our final design will be submitted to Utah County for permitting and approval. Once approval is obtained, we will begin the site preparation. Because of the remote location, we will have to upgrade existing roads to complete the necessary clearing and grading. The lifts and associated equipment will be transported by existing roads or flown into the location by helicopter. The lift manufacturer will complete the installation, which includes foundation work, tower erections, cable installation, and station construction. The manufacturer will complete testing with final adjustments, then finally the installation will be certified for operations and the lifts will open. This process will take multiple years to complete, as the location is only snow-free for 3 to 4 months a year. As you can see, there's still a lot of work to be completed now that we have a solid baseline for understanding and maintaining water quality and higher environmental standards. I appreciate you all for allowing me to share what we've been doing and our plans for the future. I'm pleased to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions from the commission?
Okay, so you mentioned construction access. Will any of that construction access be done through American Fork Canyon?
We don't know that right now. A lot of the people I talk to in the lobby are the off-road community, and it's their desire that any modifications to the road to get anything up there would not result in smoothing out the road and making it something a Subaru could drive up, to use their term. They like it rough, and Mary Ellen Gulch and Mineral Basin are both very rough off-road vehicle roads, which we would put back in place if we were to need any access through Mary Ellen Gulch. But most of this is done by helicopter.
A follow-up question, I haven't been up AF Canyon for a while, but isn't there a section of the road up there somewhere that's been damaged
Yes.
from runoff or something like
It
that?
is damaged.
Does this go
85.
through that area?
Yes.
Okay,
This is
so-
not any of the area we would ski on, but that is the part above Tibble Fork that has been closed now, and there are plans in place to repair that this summer, it sounds like.
Okay, so they would be repairing that. That wouldn't be something necessarily that Snowbird might participate in. to
I've
help repair
offered our
that.
help because we have a lot of experience building roads in these kinds of environments, and it's going to take a lot of work to get that done.
I have a question. Why do you see, I mean, was it feasible for you to get the information that you needed in the 5 years?
We needed time to complete all the work with the state and federal agencies before we were comfortable moving forward. We now have that done. We're liking some of the new lift technology that's coming out. We think it can be a better installation. So we did need this time to do the work we did. We're happy with where the improvements we've made on the Riparian Road. The water quality has improved, and we intend to keep it that way.
What remains to be done? You've asked for an extension. What takes place over that time period?
Just those items I mentioned. Yeah. Finding the right lift, getting ready to go, getting the site prep, and then permitting. It'll come back through the county. And we're ready to start.
Can we go back to the slide that showed the peaks? So just making sure I understand, because I've never been skiing.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with. So you've got the two lifts that already exist.
Yeah, so the
You're
one on the
wanting-
left goes up to the top of the Snowbird Tram. That's called Hidden Peak. And the gondola would go from Hidden Peak, where there's a 23,000 square foot building and a chairlift that unloads right there. And then it would come down. We do not go to the top of the American Fork Twin Peaks. That termination spot is on the shoulder of the American Fork Twins on the far side of Mary Ellen Gulch.
Okay, and so currently people are skiing in all of these areas right here.
Most of our skiing takes place in Mineral Basin today,
So
not in Mary Ellen Gulch. That's what we want to provide.
okay, so it's an expansion of skiing into the Mary Ellen Gulch area.
On our private property.
I heard you say the facility at the top of the tram was 23,000 square foot, but is that accurate or is it 2,300 square feet?
1,000
What's that?
in Salt Lake County.
Okay. But is it 23,000 square foot facility there? Okay.
It's a restaurant and our ski patrol headquarters. That's at the top of the tram.
And all this is accessed via Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Right, skiers would not get to these lifts through American Fork Canyon.
What about emergency access routes? Sorry, my microphone's off. Where are your emergency access routes if you're looking at a Mary Ellen Gulch versus Mineral Basin? Do you change that at all?
No.
Okay.
Any injured guest would come out via the lift. We put them on the lift and bring them out and take a toboggan down to Mineral Basin and up to the tram.
Okay.
That's currently how it works. If you're injured in Mineral Basin, you're in a toboggan on the back of the chairlift.
So anyone who's responding goes up the lift and skis down to the injured person?
Yeah, we have patrol throughout the mountain, and they take toboggans to the injured people.
Okay.
Or I assume if it's seriousness, you'd helicopter. No?
Yes, if the weather is cooperating.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for the time.
Okay, so as was mentioned, this is an administrative item that does not require a public hearing. We do have a number of people who have requested to have the opportunity to address the commission. We can take a vote on whether or not you would like to entertain a motion to open a public hearing, or if you'd like to move on to discussion. Do you have a motion one way or the other?
I move that we open it up to the people that are here.
The public hearing? Do we have a
It's-
second?
It's
or
not a public
discussion?
hearing, it's just public comment. Those are separate
Public,
things.
public comment.
Yes, sir.
Public participation.
I would second that, but would you be okay if we follow the time guide and restrictions per
Yes.
ordinance as well?
Yes.
Okay, I second that then.
Do we have a list of, like, a number, how many people are signed up?
About 15.
Okay.
Madam Chair, it might be worth asking if any of them want to consolidate their time to see if a spokesperson, you can capture that. That gives that spokesperson a little additional time. Maybe worth exploring that option with those that wish to speak.
Do we need to establish rules for public comment prior to taking the vote?
No, those have already kind of been established. There's a timer. We have a timer. It'll be 3 minutes. Generally is what we allow per person. If more than three want to combine their time, then it could be up to 7 minutes for a spokesperson.
Okay.
Again, we have other items tonight, so we kind of want to not be here all night, but respect those other items tonight.
Yeah, and can I just ask those that are here to speak just one question? Does anyone that wants to speak do they understand the difference between an administrative decision and a legislative decision?
Oh, we can ask Bryce to cover that if you'd like.
Yeah, because my experience in public service that there is a big disconnect when people don't understand that people don't understand that we are bound by certain by the law. That we have a certain amount of freedom to choose, legislative, but less. If somebody meets the administrative, we really have no choice. But I don't know if Bryce or council could take just a minute to explain that. That might help ease some of the frustration that I think people might experience tonight.
Sure, I'll start, and Mr. Ayer can help out. Again, a conditional use is an administrative land use decision. The legislative process happened when it was determined that this was an appropriate use in certain zones anywhere in the county subject to meeting those requirements. And if an applicant can show that they can meet those requirements and any adverse anticipated detrimental effects can be reasonably mitigated, not eliminated, but mitigated, then they're entitled to approval. Those type of applications are not subject, nor should they be subject to public clamor. People don't want it. That's been established. To Mr. Harrod's point, a legislative act is maybe the more appropriate time. There's more latitude for considering public clamor, for lack of a better term, or public wishes on whether or not this area should be zoned a certain way. That's an example of a legislative decision. We have a text amendment later tonight that establishes rules, not administers rules. When you're trying to establish what the governing rule will be relative to a land use, then that's the legislative function and is subject to a public hearing, and those type of feelings and comments can be considered.
And council, what happens to the county if we don't follow that? What happens? Does that put the county and the taxpayer at a certain risk if we don't follow state code?
Exactly. Well, you're not following the law, therefore there is litigation, and therefore there's liability. That's what happens. An administrative decision is an application of the law, and you can get that wrong. That's where mistakes are made. Legislative is creating law, and rarely do courts second guess a body creating law. If that's what your representatives want to create, then they create it. But the application is much different. We take a law that's already been passed, and we apply it to a set of circumstances, and that can be second guessed by a judge. And so that's what would happen. If we don't follow the law, we can be liable for that. And so that's why it's like you said, the discretion is somewhat more narrow because we're limited to that law, which Bryce really explained well.
So it would be good if the comments were mostly focused on should this be extended, why or why not do you feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. As Bryce mentioned, this is not a rehearing of the conditional use permit. That was passed. That is law. It is an allowed use. That can't be debated now. It can't be changed now. There is nothing you can do tonight to change that permit. The only question is, should it be extended to allow for substantial justice to be done to this project?
Having had a motion and a second, we'll take a vote, starting on this end.
Aye.
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 Okay, so we are going to do public comment period, and how it's going to work is I will read off the people who are on this list who already asked to speak, and like we've been discussing here, there will be a time limit, and we'd ask that if somebody goes before you and they say what you were going to say, feel free to just stand up and raise your hand that you agree with that. You don't need to restate what was already stated. And we'd also like to remind you that comments that are outside of what we are able to address tonight are not comments that we're able to consider in our decision. So if your comments are as we've been talking about related to the conditional use permit, that's not something that's at our discretion. It's not what is on the agenda tonight. And we are not able to make any changes to what has already been decided prior to tonight. So we'd ask that your comments be toward the item on the agenda of really the time frame that that the applicant is able to move forward on the project that has already been approved. So with that, we'll invite, and I apologize in advance if I get anybody's name mispronounced or anything. I am so sorry. It looks like Holly McKinley.
Madam Chair, I think
Yes.
some people signed up for a later item. This is items 1 and 2.
Oh, right. Thank you. We have columns
She can still
on
talk
here.
if she wants.
Woohoo, okay. This is item 1, so that would be Dave Fields.
Sorry, I had my chance.
Yes, you did. And the other 2 people are also with you, so we'll skip down to Holdman.
Thanks, guys, for taking the time to hear public comment. That's pretty important to me, I think. I kind of feel like your hands are tied. You're kind of giving that impression to everybody tonight here. These guys and you guys saying this is about this is about we got to follow the law. But I kind of want to give a little background. I think it's important to have a kind of a broader view of everything. I'm kind of like a youth speaker with the high councilman, so I got to try to hurry. Back in 2011, Snowbird proposed bringing a ski resort in American Fort Canyon with the tram to the top of the famous Twin Peaks that can be seen from all of Salt Lake Valley and Heber Valley, along with the chairlift in Mary Ellen. Shortly after that, the Mountain Accord was created in 2015 to make critical decisions and implement solutions to preserve the Central Wasatch and ensure its long-term vitality. During this, Mountain Accord and Snowbird orchestrated a land swap that would give Snowbird land in Utah County's American Fort Canyon in exchange for lands in Little Cottonwood Canyon. You guys remember that Mountain Accord? Any of you? No? With this expansion came a new idea to bring a tram all the way down to Tibble Fork, essentially creating a private and for-profit ski resort in American Fort Canyon. A few caught wind of these developments and suggestions and started a social media page to get the word out to the public what was going on. Many governments in Utah County had no idea this was going on. We had an overwhelming response from local user groups that were alarmed and got involved in preserving our canyon for a more natural, fee-free recreation experience. Through the efforts of many, the tram idea was eventually shot down, although they pursued their development and additional ski chairs and zip lines in Mary Ellen, which you guys had that proposal. Mountain Land Association of Governments formed an organization, mostly funded by Snowbird in the tune of $50,000 for a scoping of this proposal. They also provided a survey to the public, although many of the questions were kind of skewed a little bit to promote further development of the canyon. There were answers that were quite clear. There was a clear winner, and there's a lot of the hiking community here, and this is why. The highest reason people visit the canyon were hiking and walking at 67%, followed by viewing wildlife, birds, fish, natural features, scenery, flowers, etc. was 38%. Relaxing and hanging out in the canyon were 32%. Photography, which is my favorite one, was 26%. Exercising was 19%. You kind of move up the list and you see what's kind of going on here. Putting in 70-foot ski poles to accommodate ski chairs and zip lines across the highest points in AF Canyon are not conducive to any of the aforementioned reasons people recreate in the canyon. I'm sure you guys saw that picture there. I sent you some photographs of the Twin Peaks. You can see it just goes like right across the bottom of the Twin Peaks, right to that ridge line there. And that's going to be seen from all over in the canyon, American Fort Canyon, Heber Valley, and Salt Lake a little bit. That's 3 minutes.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you for your comments.
I hope you just consider what all people have to say, and it's going to be tough, but make a good decision.
Thank you. Next on the list is Brad Frost.
Thank you very much. It's always good to know what it feels like on this side, being at this microphone. And so if I run out of time, I just want to, in advance, thank you for what you do. I know it's a thankless service, and it's just out of goodness of your heart, you give of your time. I want to bring up a couple ideas, okay? Because I do think that there is boxes that have been checked, and rightfully so. I don't feel like, I was a little worried about public clamor tonight, that it might be a little bit more felt. I'm glad it's a little more subdued. It's out there, they're just not here right now. And so, but I have always been, American Fork that is not part of our city, the canyon. We don't even touch its boundary. But with a great sense of pride, I've always loved that it's called after a city that I grew up in and have led and done certain things at certain times. Good or bad news, it's on the, it comes up, American Fork Canyon, something happened. And so it's very, very sacred to a lot of people for a lot of different ways. The one thing that I was encouraged that I heard tonight from Dave is the ability to have public access. That was kind of a new one for me. And as it was stated through him, I think that you have the discretion to include that in a motion, if that's where you're going, to say, okay, let's have public access. Do not deny the public the ability to go up there and use it. But I think that this is not a simple math question. There is some complexity to it, and I think that this decision is before you. How long is enough? Again, as Willie explained, this has been going on for a very long time, and there's a really, very, very dirty past to it that caused a lot of discontent amongst the public. And Dave said this, and I know it probably wasn't on purpose for any reason. I would take it for something prideful. Again, he said it's part of American Fork. It is not. This is under the county stewardship, your stewardship, and so I would just say, do you have to give it another 5 years? Why not give it a smaller period? Or why not consider everything that's going here? One of my biggest concerns is nobody has been able to provide any insurance to me, whether it's by paper or by something legal, that below this, and as a crow flies not very far, is the heart of our culinary water source. We have a spring. And with the capacity and the amount of water that is up there in those mines, if something breaches this, you could put in jeopardy 35,000 people to 50,000 people, their culinary water source, not their outdoor water use. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is Elizabeth Meltzer.
All right, that's me, but I didn't think I marked that box. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, just said 1 and 2. Okay. Troy Smith or Greg Jackson?
That's for
3 and 4. There we go. Karina,
Slippery.
thank you.
Can I allow my time for him to finish up?
Okay.
Sorry, you're not sick of me yet. I just want to finish up. She offered, so I didn't want to take her time. But I think the biggest thing is, again, is they extended it twice. This will be the second time. They've had 10 years. And you guys mentioned, Bryce mentioned, like, they need more time, a year. And then they mentioned, well, we need these 5 years to do this. What about the previous 5 years? I mean, it's been 10 years. Is there an expiration date here? Things expire, things change. I have a lot of concerns about this. This goes over to Mary Ellen, and I talked to Dave a little bit about it. This is like way over. There's going to be no access from American Fork Canyon. I'm a big skier. I ski backcountry and resort ski a lot. Never miss a powder day. I've even skied snowboard, and I like it. But I think there needs to be a balance here. But just to try to get people out of that back to snowbird, I mean, you have to leave like, 1:30, 2 o'clock to get them out there. And what about safety issues of skiers getting trapped so far away from the base of snowbird? That's a big concern as well. So it's true, you guys are here to make a decision whether you're going to extend this conditional use permit. But that's a decision that you can make. And if you do make the decision that it doesn't seem like it's a very viable option anymore, they've had 10 years to do it, nothing was done, and that's something you need to consider. There is one thing that they talked a little bit about, and they said that they've done all these things to fulfill their requirement. But the biggest thing they haven't done yet is perform. They haven't really performed yet on any of these special uses, conditional use permits. They heli ski in there, they cat ski on their property already. It's a great way to use their lands in a low impact way for a win-win for the general public and private property owner. I would just say stick to the code, do not extend another 5 years to Snowbird to further let the camel's nose in the tent, so to speak. You know, it started at Mineral Basin a long time ago when Governor Herbert was a commissioner. Now it's coming to Marielle, and they keep saying we're not going to come down to Table Fork. Well, we kind of see the history here, what's going on. You know, it's just stick to the code, do not extend another 5 years, let Snowbird further let their camel into the tent, eventually kicking us public people out of that. I think that's very important because we all recreate there and we enjoy that already fee-free. And that's going to affect a lot of users in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorena Bush.
I agree with my friend.
Thank you. Tina Bean, you marked Snowbird. There are 2 items for Snowbird. You're welcome to come up now if you'd like. Okay.
Thank you for letting us speak. And I'm just here on behalf of all the many different users. We have a big hiking group on Facebook with 36,000 local hikers that just download photos every day of where they're hiking. And we have so many users in this canyon. That's what makes it so different from the Cottonwood Canyons. In fact, we have, let me just state all the types of users. You've got hikers, rock climbers, snowmobilers, mountain bikers, cross-country skiing, backcountry skiing, road cycling, camping, fishing, hunting, off-roading, which we do a lot of, horseback riding, dirt biking, and photography and painting up the canyon. And so we care a lot about this canyon because it is the last canyon that is close to the city that we can access in 30 minutes or less to get away and decompress and not be denied access into the areas way back in the canyon. And so with the onslaught of high-density housing throughout this valley and single-family homes being built that have backyards smaller than a family room, people and children need somewhere wild to escape from it all, and American Fork Canyon provides that. But over the past decade, I've been hiking a lot in these canyons, and I've seen a big change up the Cottonwoods, I'm sure many of you have, that we've witnessed, and of what the ski industry can do to our wild places. We have seen how ski resorts encroach little by little into our canyons. The saying, less is more and more is less, would be a good rule of thumb for development. When you develop a new area of a ski resort, say Mary Ellen Gulch, it creates more. The need for more energy, more roads, more infrastructure, and more money to support the use of that new area. When you add in infrastructure for one type of use, it's pushing out other ones or degrading their experience. Perhaps developing a little less could help Snowbird make a profit by using minimalism and wildness as part of their ski resort. Over 6 million people use the ski resorts in Utah, and the cost of the $1.2 billion gondola up Little Cottonwood Canyon, which we never thought would happen, will likely fall on taxpayers in the future, and it only serves a privileged class of skiers and wealthy tourists from out of state. Even though tens of thousands of Utahns wrote emails in opposition to the gondola, they weren't even heard and their concerns were ignored, which is why we're here today. We don't want that to happen. We're just going to be a voice here today to say we don't want encroachment by Snowbird. And it sounds like Mr. Fields has a sincere heart. I'd like to believe that there'll never be encroachment, but we're just setting out a message of what we don't want. Personally, Mary Ellen Gulch is one of the prettiest parts of the canyon. I'd hate to see towers in that. Most of us do not want to see lift towers, buildings, condos, road widenings, or anything like this in the future that could be seen as a type of encroachment. We urge you to not extend the permit. I don't think it'll hurt Snowbird to do something different outside the box and find a more minimal way to use this land on their property. We hope that you will listen to the people whom you were elected to serve. And we don't want to sacrifice one wild space for a small group of skiers when a whole group of people are using it for over 15 uses. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Doug Bailey, you also wrote down Snowbird. Doug Bailey. Okay, if not, then we'll move to Brian Jones, who wrote down Snowbird.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the commission and everybody here who showed up for this important topic, including Snowbird for showing up and presenting their proposal. I'm wearing a cardigan that was knitted in my great-grandfather's knitting mill in Los Angeles in 1940. You might think that I should put this away in a drawer or frame it and protect it so it never gets used, but I'm wearing it, which means I may damage it, but it means that also I get to use it. So it raises to me the question of what does the word preserve mean? And a lot of us here are concerned about preserving a place that is very special to us, as people have mentioned many of the reasons why it is special. The house I live in Cedar Hills, is near the mouth of American Fork Canyon. That house used to be wilderness. So I recognize that living as people, we encroach on wilderness all the time. As a skier, climber, and trail runner, I value multi-use natural areas, especially in American Fork Canyon. I recently put together a 110-mile course to run in a single go to take me through the entire American Fork Canyon, from Box Elder Peak over to the American Fork Twins, over to the Mineral Basin area, over Miller Hill and back over towards Mount Timpanogos, and then out finishing in Pleasant Grove. I love that canyon. I live in that canyon, even though my house is not in that canyon. I appreciate that Snowbird's proposal may fall within a reasonable balance of preserving and using. Unfortunately, as has been mentioned, a warming hut expands into flush toilets, expands into a cafe, which expands into a lodge. I also commend Snowbird for emphasizing that they have no intent to access Mineral Basin skiing via the North Fork Road through American Fork Canyon. But of course, the construction access is going to take place over many years and have a major impact. Thus, my question is, what else can Snowbird propose and explain to this committee of where the limit of their encroachment is? So what I would urge this committee to do is to use this opportunity to seek greater detail here from Snowbird, not about what is currently on the table, but what will never be on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Colby Rollins.
Hi, Colby Rollins. I sit on the board at Snowbird, and I'll just address actually some of the questions that people have been bringing up since I have time. First of all the land that we're proposing these two lifts to be on are private property, and the only private land that Snowbird has is in Mary Ellen Gulch and Mineral Basin. And so the idea of somehow obtaining property for the 6.5 miles down to Tibble Fork and have access to get up the canyon is just it's not feasible. It's also wilderness area, and it has public lands. So the idea that somehow we're encroaching somewhere else is just unrealistic, especially if you understand the CE1 zone and the purpose of it. And it's very limited on what we can do. You can't have running water and some of those things. So it really, truly is only to do 2 ski lifts, some warming huts that are in that area. Also like to discuss briefly what's happened over the last 9 years. I think Dave did a pretty good job of talking about it, but we spent a lot of time with American Fork City and with Utah County really getting a baseline and understanding the water quality that's up there. And I'll tell you today, the water quality is better than it was 9 years ago. And that follows the same stewardship that Snowbird's shown over the last 50 plus years in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and the 26 plus years they've been running lifts in American Fork Canyon. And now you've got 9 years of baseline study that shows all the different metals that are in Mary Ellen Gulch. So there's been an extensive amount of work that's been done to better understand the water quality there so that as we build lifts in the future, we can do so safely and protect the environment. Now, as it relates to the next 5 years, there is a significant amount of work that has to be done. And it starts with planning, which we've done some of that, but to move roads and I think, I can't speak for Dave, but the likelihood that we can travel a bunch of equipment up that canyon, it's pretty challenging. I would suspect that most of that's going to come via helicopter. The building at the top that you'd asked about, the 23,000 foot building, 100% of that was brought up the mountain from the Little Cottonwood Canyon side, and a good chunk of it was helicoptered in. So I think the process is the same for that as well. It's going to take a couple of years. You only have 3 or 4 months of dry time to put pads down and to get those lifts up. And so our request for 5 years is intentional. It's to have that done in the 5-year period. And as we mentioned to Bryce, if this extension for 5 years is the end and we have to be completed in 5 years, we will make a commitment that we're done and we will not ask for another extension. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Vanessa Stanfill.
The group of those previously concerned about detrimental effects of construction and long-term encroachment in the canyon.
Thank you. Jez Stanfill, similar?
I also agree.
Thank you. Mark, whose last name begins with an F. I am so sorry, I'm not sure why.
That's my poor handwriting. It's not my fault.
So if you'd like to state your name into the microphone, that would be helpful.
My name is Mark Flickinger. I'm a local attorney. I'm also a Utah County resident. I'm here to speak to the concerns of the extension of the permit. The conditional use permit is not unlimited. It's conditional and it has time limits by design. 2 extensions that have already been granted are a lot. 10 years is a long time to still yet have unanswered questions that have been brought up by concerned citizens, that have been mentioned by Snowbird about the use of the trails. And we're still here 10 years afterward, and we don't have clear answers about what might happen with the trails, whether they'll be used, if so, to what extent, how it will impact the water. We still haven't established how that will be impacted, nor has Snowbird given any explanation as to why more time after 10 years is needed to determine whether that will in fact take place. It makes it very difficult for the commission to know whether the use is in fact unreasonable, whether the detrimental impact will be excessive or will still continue to cause problems with the water quality. And so I would submit to the commission that 10 years is just simply too long, and doing another extension when Snowbird is here and still is yet to provide answers to those key questions as to how the trails will be impacted or whether they'll even be used at all, simply leaves too many questions unanswered after 10 years' time. It's submitted on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our list of people who have signed up to speak on this item. So,
Looks like we have one. Somebody might have come in. Oh, do you want to?
would you like to extend to additional comments?
You did sign the paper.
You may not have put the X. If you'd like to come up, but you didn't put the X, that's fine. Yeah. You could state your name, please.
Yep. My name's Brian Twyman. I'm a lifelong resident of Utah County, growing up in Linden. Started out on my own in Orem. Now I live in Lehigh, and I own a business there. I represent Bore-Off Road. We're a 501c3 nonprofit in Lehigh, consisting of members who donate their time, equipment, expertise, and trail maintenance and user education, largely throughout the whole state, but largely in Utah County. Our group's experience in American Fork Canyon is unique. We are the trail adoption group for FR 085. That's that road with the washout you were just discussing. This is the main thoroughfare from Tibble Fork to Midway. It connects all the trails in the canyon, including Mary Ellen's, Miller Hill, Mineral Basin, among others. Our group has logged thousands of hours in the canyon over the last 10 years with the Forest Service and in the upkeep and preservation of these areas. I remember, excuse me, I remember well during the Tipple Fork Dam renovation project, they accidentally allowed a portion of heavy metals that were trapped behind the dam to go downstream. This killed all the fish in the river and resulted in fines for the North Utah County Water Conservancy District. This was a warning shot across our bow of the dangers in expansion and building in the canyon from tailing piles, runoff, and the risk of disturbing these heavy metals that expansion will only add to. It was mentioned that this has been mitigated over the last few years. Well, I remember the mitigation. They rerouted the runoff away from the mine tailings and called it good. The mine tailings are still there. The potential is still there. We talked about the extension of this permit, and how in 100 years, everyone will, can't let it go forever. Well, we don't have to wait 100 years. Here we are 8 years later. I don't think any of you were at that original meeting that we were at 8 years ago. So you don't really know the backstory to be making these decisions, unfortunately. But if we do believe that the original commission was correct in their approval of this original permit, then we should also believe that the time they set out should be correct as well. They did give them an extension on top of that time. We should stick to that. If the people originally involved in this set those, we should stick with it. Excuse me. Not a public speaker. The last thing I'll just say is that Snowbird is based in Salt Lake County. I implore you to listen to your local residents, such as myself, who want to see our county and our best interests protected. I don't want the risks of them putting in with this extension. I think it's time for the extension's over. I think it needs to go back through a commission when they're ready, when they're finally ready. They need more time, they need more time. Okay, come back when you're ready. Let's run it through a commission that's involved from beginning to end, get their permit in place then, and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any additional comments? Sure, coming up.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Koza. I just wanted to make the point. I know that all you guys are concerned about is the extension or not. And when asked why is it necessary, a point was made that newer trams were being reviewed. But I don't feel like that should factor into the equation because that logic can always be applied. So in 5 years, they could say again, newer technology was being reviewed on and on. And so I just feel like in your consideration for extension, that point doesn't seem very valid to me. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, would you like to come up?
Thank you. I'm only going to need maybe 1 minute at best. So I think another concerning thing, this is not a Hail Mary. I want you to know that. But early on, everything we talked about was aligning with the EPA, the current federal regulations, which this permit is under. I think we run a risk too, if by extending this, we hear what things that are happening in Washington. It's a very real thing that a lot of the things that this is based on could change. Therefore, I would implore you to just say exactly, I couldn't say it any more than what was said, or give a very small extension to consider that some things could change. I think that's relevant in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we need a motion to conclude public comment? Okay. So I guess a question that I'd have would be, what are we even able to do at this point? There's been questions of whether or not we can change the conditions that were applied, or whether or not we can change the timeline. Are any of those things that are even on the table, or are we restricted to what is presented to us right now?
You can't go back and change the previously approved conditions. What you're looking at is whether or not the standard of substantial justice is, you feel has been met. If there are, I guess, potentially if there are conditions that are related to that substantial justice, you can apply that as part of any approval. You can approve a lesser amount that's been requested. That's an option. deny if you don't feel those standards have been met. You can deny also. So you'd have to make that finding, that specific findings as to why that's not met.
Are we the deciding body on this, or does
Yes.
it go? Okay, we
No,
are.
This is the land use authority. You are the land use authority on this. So.
As of last year.
Thank you very much, Annika.
Are there any other questions anyone would like to ask of either the applicant or staff?
I have a question. One of the conditions was that, my biggest concern is always with American Fork Canyon and for people that I've talked to is water quality. But how long is it? But a baseline was requested, and how long do you need normally for a baseline on water quality? I mean, is there anybody here that could answer? I mean, do we have a water engineer here? Because, for me, that's kind of the issue. Is I don't know how you could do it shorter without having some type of base. I mean, a baseline by its very definition takes a number of years, and if half their time was wasted to determine a baseline, is that fair to count that against them? I guess, but we don't have nothing in staff reports or anything like that. What's a baseline required?
So there's no water engineer at this table, but I was involved in the previous hearings, and the water quality monitoring plan that was approved involved, as I recall, representatives from the State Division of Water Quality and other professionals that determined that the original approved baseline was 2 years, I believe. It may have been 3, but before any construction could happen. So I think they established at that time that's what was an acceptable baseline for the requirements that they were hoping to accomplish. And so that's why I think the original approval included that extension to 2020 when it was approved in 2016 to accommodate that baseline where no construction could happen. Yeah, you're right. I think
for my stats classes, that seems unusually short.
I mean, obviously a longer sample period's probably maybe more accurate, but.
So is it fair to say this is a layered approach? A has to be met before B, before C. And so with each extension, we have to meet these requirements which take time before we can move to these requirements which take time before these?
Specifically on the conditions of approval that were done in 2016, that hasn't existed in the extensions. I think that was contemplated in the original 2016 approval. The extensions were more based on circumstances that may have changed after that approval at the applicant's request.
Okay.
So, a question about the mining rights. These mining claims or whatever, if an individual who owns those claims felt a desire to mine and execute on those claims, are they allowed to take any types of equipment in there to mine those claims, or are there restrictions there?
So specifically, the property in question that's the subject of this application, all of the patented mining claims are owned by Snowbird. And so the entire project area is owned by Snowbird. I know there are other patented mining claims in the area that are owned by other entities, and I would imagine that they're entitled to whatever rights those claims give them.
Additional questions?
I think you had some comments, or I don't know if that's appropriate to have the
No, we
applicant.
concluded
Okay.
that. Well, we get the applicant, we can bring back up if you have questions for the applicant.
Do you have some comments?
Many of the claims up in Mineral Basin, Marion Gulch are surface claim rights, not mineral rights, just so you know.
Could you expand on what surface claim rights includes?
Well, surface claim rights, you can't mine. So if you have mineral rights, you could mine, but that's the difference between the two.
So Most of the state is just surface.
Correct. Well, most up there, and if you haven't looked at a map, it's pretty interesting because there's even claims where they're overlapping. But what we're talking about, surface rights.
I guess I've got a question of, I'm trying to see, like most of us, far-reaching consequences. Trying to understand the impact of this decision, and I guess I'm wondering if we were to, for example, say no to this extension, where does that leave Snowbird? What is Snowbird going to do then? What if we were to say yes? Where does that leave? I guess don't have a really well-worded question. I'm just thinking out loud here.
I can't speak for the applicant, but I can speak for the ordinance requirements. If an extension was not granted, then their previous approval would expire on April 7th of this year. When by expire means they have not obtained a permit pursuant to the the approved conditional use. I would guess that they would probably work quite quickly to obtain a permit pursuant to that, to memorialize that approval. If they did not meet or obtain a permit at that date, then their approval would, I guess, go away, and any future projects that they would have to start over and come for a new conditional use.
But theoretically, they would still, then it would be approved. I mean, because nothing's.
It's already been approved.
It's already been approved.
It would be a new application, but it'd be subject to the same provisions of a conditional use, and they're entitled to that use if, certain conditions can be applied that mitigate any adverse effects, and so it'd fall under the same principles of those type of conditional uses.
Which is not an application that would need to come back before us. It would be just within your office?
They'd be coming back to you.
Okay.
Planning Commission.
And at that,
Now, we're talking about a new conditional use, correct? Not a building permit.
We're talking about if we were to decline tonight and they moved forward with needing to take the next steps in order to.
Oh, correct. Yes, then that would just be an administrative submittal like anyone else in the county that's trying to obtain a permit for a use or structure. That would just come to community development staff and we'd review it and all the applicable agencies.
but
I feel like I'm giving you an aneurysm over there. This is true.
if we denied the extension and their conditional use permit expired and they came back to apply for another conditional use permit, it would come back before us. At that time, though, even if we denied it at that time, it would still go before the county commissioners. It would not go before the county commissioners at that time?
No,
Okay,
conditional
okay.
use is.
We're still the.
You are the
okay.
final answer.
Okay.
Until they change it again at the state.
But if they were to try and get the permit before the deadline is cut off, they still have the ability to move forward.
That's correct.
So really, I guess I'm trying to get this down to the core. Us voting to deny doesn't change the fact that they could get it, and us voting to approve extends it out, potentially helping them to study the situation more, get things better prepared.
Correct. That it would extend their time to obtain that permit. They would still have to go to the work and get that permit to utilize that original approval in 2016. Subject to that new termination date that was established at that point.
And if they were to move forward today with obtaining the permit to go forward, what kind of timeline are they looking at as far as having to complete the project or a permit running out, obtaining an extension on that permit?
It's April 7th, 2030.
Well, they have to obtain the permit before
That's
April.
kind of a nuanced question. This is a conditional use that has multiple structures that would probably potentially be phased and go through different projects. Once a permit is issued, the building code requires progress measured by inspections every 6 months or so. And so have to be progress for each utilized or each issued permit, but they'd be free to time their subsequent permits at their own pace. There's currently no condition built in to say the entire project has to be complete at this point. It's sometimes these projects get a little too complex to do that.
Any additional questions?
Rick? No.
I'm just going to make some comments here. I've made a few notes from some of the comments that have been made, so I'm not for building and creating a resort per se in American Fork Canyon. I do feel like Snowbird has been a good partner for the public. I think, and I would think that it would be within their rights as private property owners, they could fence this property off and exclude the public access. Is that correct?
Generally, yes, and this was a topic that came up a lot in the original approval. There are county Class D roads, public roads, that do traverse their property, and those are subject to public road rules.
But each side of that road, I mean, I'm
Correct.
going the far way out there. I mean, even though those roads have to remain open or should remain open, whatever, in theory, they could be fenced on every side. You'd have a
Correct.
road to nowhere that would allow no public access. So I feel like Snowbird has been a good partner for the public in the past. I've accessed some of those areas on a four-wheeler, and I actually rolled a four-wheeler over. It wasn't very fun. So I feel like Snowbird's been a good partner, allowing public access to enjoy the canyon on their property. Are there concerns that I have? Absolutely. Mayor Frost brought up water quality and stuff like that. I'm a water guy. I would like to see, I realize that in some of the stipulations, they're required to do monitoring during construction, stuff like that. I would like to see, I don't know what happens after that, what regulations are, because you're not a water system, so there's probably no state requirements to monitor that water, but I would like to see something in place to a continuation of some type of water monitoring. I do want to state for the record, though, that based on my understanding of the project, the rebuilding the Tibble Fork Dam had nothing to do with the Snowbird development, and that release that happened there had nothing to do with Snowbird. So I would just want to make sure that that's clear, because sometimes I get confused on how things happen. Could I ask you real quick, just could you describe heliskiing and cat skiing to give the public, a little bit more definition of how that happens, when it happens, and maybe how often it happens or something like that?
Sure. When weather and avalanche conditions provide, we have helicopter skiing through Wasatch Powderbird Guides, or Powderbird as it is now known. And they have a permit to ski throughout the Wasatch, and Mary Ellen Gulch is one of the areas that they ski. It's not the most frequently used area. And then we also have a snowcat operation that mostly skis in lower mineral basins. So our skiers go down to the base of the mineral basin lift and then get in a snowcat, and the snowcat takes them up the mountain and they ski back down.
Are there conditions that prohibit that or, limit that ability to?
Avalanche conditions are the biggest factor, and snowpack. You have to have enough snowpack to run the snowcat on. And just to your question, we have 9 years of water data for that area, and it's ongoing.
Okay, thank you. Some other thoughts that I had, and pardon me, sometimes my brain might not act or function like a normal person, but one of the concerns is about increased traffic in the canyon. And as was pointed out, the continued growth of the Utah County does not limit the amount of traffic that goes up American Fork Canyon. Sometimes it's kind of disgusting because there's a ton of traffic that goes up American Fork Canyon. This application is not going to prevent that. That traffic is going to continue to increase whether Snowbird skis up there or not. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. There was a talk about ski towers being viewed from mountainsides and stuff like that. Is that an ideal thing? Maybe not, but neither are the high power line poles that go across from mountaintop to mountaintop in various parts of the state that, you know, could be considered destruction of a beautiful view. So again, so some of those are some of my thoughts. And I think, let me just, one other thing, is it within the stipulations already that a certain amount of public access is already retained with this conditional use permit and stuff? I didn't see it, but.
We can't change D roads. I mean,
Right,
those
so
are
D
No,
roads and stuff.
there was nothing specific to ensuring certain public access other than what exists through the rights of the public roads. And what,
legal.
if you don't mind, I got one clarifying comment. I know it's been brought up several times. The current land use ordinance does not allow utilization of this conditional use or access for facilities associated with this conditional use through American Fork Canyon. All access has to be through the existing resort. Okay. So I want that to be clear. That's built into the ordinance. That's an ordinance requirement.
You ready for a motion?
Yes, a motion or any additional comment?
If there's any additional comments,
Yeah.
you know, we have to start somewhere. So, is there?
If there isn't further
I
comment.
mean, if I were the king of the county, yeah, I would do things one way, but I just don't think. I think that what we can do here is work with Snowbird to, you know, be good citizens, be good stewards of that area up there that they own, and you know, try and be good partners, and that seems to me to be the common sense solution. You know, they've got it approved. They could get a permit right away. I think it would makes more sense to try and work with people and yeah. So I guess that's where I've reached.
If we have a better outcome by going slower, then I tend to side with going at a pace that allows for better consideration of impact and ways to do things better. I mean, I am very happy to have lots of water data before moving forward on a project that can impact water. And if that means that they took time to get that water data, then, you know, that's part of being a good steward of the environment.
So we at least start. We can see where people are. I would make the motion that we approve the extension, the 5-year extension. I would, if it's possible, if I can make that, that it is our bias that this be the last extension on this project. I don't know. I don't know if we can't bind a future planning commission, but I would state that. And here are my reasons. Is I am concerned about private property rights. They do own this property outright, and so concerns of whether it even be scarring or other things is. I've seen lots of scarring up and down. I do believe that they've put a good faith effort to move forward, and as Karen has said, you know, I think more is better, and I'm concerned that if we make everybody who goes a little bit further, I think people will tend not to do that and push things faster than and maybe we'll get a project that shouldn't have been approved or moved. But I would rather have more data. But I think they've made that effort, and I think for me, I think this actually protects the taxpayer because I think this is. I do think that they have done just what was the term? Just.
Substantial justice.
Substantial
Yeah.
justice.
And so that's the motion that I put forward.
Would you like to simplify your motion to,
Yes, if I couldn't find the page.
yeah, it took me a second too, under staff recommendations.
Right,
Yeah, that
right
one.
here. That the Utah County Planning Commission approved the extension of the termination date for Appeal 1552, a conditional use request for access ski lifts and various associated mountain resort facilities, subject to staff findings included in Section 4 of the staff report and the conditions included in the 2016 and 2019 action reports, restated with updated code references and approval dates as follows. That the board finds that the conditional use meets the standard found in section 16.94 of the Utah County Land Use Ordinance.
Commissioner Harris, I'm sorry. You don't have to read them all.
Okay.
You're free to.
Yeah, and the rest, thank you.
Yes.
I apologize, but I just want you to know that's an option. You can say as stated.
As the staff recommended.
Can I hate to interject while you guys are
Please.
deliberating, but you mentioned the ability to include an expectation that this be considered to be the last type of extension. You're correct. You can't bind a future planning commission, but I think that's an appropriate finding. Staff's findings kind of contemplated that this should be enough time to do that. Obviously, conditions in the world can change, and we don't know that, but so I think that's captured in those findings.
Okay.
But you can articulate it a little clearer if you'd like.
Just that it is this board's expectation that it should be able to be completed in the 5-year extension.
And I think a future planning commission can take that into consideration.
Okay.
Right, it would be included in their packet if it ever came back. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Just
or an amendment
another
to the
comment.
motion?
Do you feel like with the discussions that have been had and presented from Snow Board, that the public access with their ATV loop and stuff that's created is sufficient public access?
I'm concerned. I'm not the attorney. I'm concerned that we can't necessarily impose things more. My greatest concern is I'm a great lover of Little Deer Creek. I grew up riding Little Deer Creek, and a property owner bought it and moved the Class D road, and I don't consider it a Class D road. It is. I'm a pretty good rider, and I struggled to ride when they moved it, and so I would hope. I think they've been good partners so far. I would hope they would keep the road where it is, that they don't, because you just have to have the right of way. And so I think that they've shown that they're good partners. And so I don't think that we can add additional things. But I would, plead with the property owner that they continue to open it and not move it and block it off on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, having been seconded, we'll take a vote, starting with Commissioner Hurd.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. And we move to the next item on our agenda, which is also related to Snowbird. But
So
it's the same.
I think we already discussed it. So unless you have further questions specific to the tower heights, you just make a similar motion.
Okay. Do we have any questions or?
Maybe think everybody.
This, just like the last one, it doesn't change anything. It's just an extension of what was already approved.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this one, they have to proceed with the first one to utilize this one because they'll be building towers at that point. So this is specific to heights of towers.
I guess I'll motion to approve this one as well, as stated.
Okay.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, we'll start with Commissioner Sullivan Love.
Aye.
And then
Aye.
Aye.
aye. That motion also passes. Okay, item number 3 is Quicksilver Solar, request to amend a previously approved conditional use. And to everyone who came, just like to thank you for participating in the public process. It's important.
As staff, I would echo that. I think that was, very, very good decorum and very good respect in the participation. So I'm glad you pointed that
And
out.
appreciated all of the public comment that was emailed ahead of time. I read
Yeah.
through every single one.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a presentation from
Yeah,
staff?
Greg will take this one.
Greg Robinson, Community Development Staff. So this is an amendment to an existing conditional use that was granted I don't remember what it's granted. Oh, it was just granted last year, sorry. Next slide. This is the proposed, so this is the area. Originally, it was proposed, the areas that are being amended or the applicant is requesting to amend this application by adding additional properties. The properties are identified in those two areas, one on the west side and one on the or 3 parcels on the east side. The area that is being included or added to this is an additional 480 acres. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind. So this area is also adjacent to other conditional uses that were approved through this process. Those were approved for approximately 1,600 acres for the Quicksilver 1 and 1,750, precisely, for the Quicksilver 2 project. The total area of the amendment would now be just under 2,000 acres. The facility is for a solar project. It is a utility scale solar project that is anticipated to be 440 megawatts producing for this facility. Excuse me, sorry. The original approval was granted last year, and the expiration date on that was in 2029. They did not ask for an additional time on on this approval, so we maintained the original approval date of May 21st, 2029 as the expiration date for this amendment. This amendment includes, like I said, 4 additional parcels. Those parcels on the east side will create because of the other approvals and the configuration of those, will create an additional 2 islands that are within the approved area for this entire facility. Originally, the first approval did create an island, and if you want to go to the next slide. This is kind of a zoomed out area kind of showing you where it is. In the next slide, please. So this is the site plan that was submitted by Quicksilver. They show a reserved access route for the parcel on the north. The site plan did not include a reserved access route for the 2 parcels that would be created, the 2 islands within that would be created. Staff is recommending that the site plan include, for any island created, reserved 56-foot right-of-way, or not, it's not a right-of-way, but an access road or access area to be able to allow those properties access in the future to those areas for those property owners. The property owners within that are within those islands would need to work with the applicant or the property owners that own the property to get to their property. They would need to work with them to obtain access easements for those properties. this is private property. There are no public roads that are adjacent to this. Access to this site and property surrounding it is generally done through access easements or understandings between property owners to access their property. There are not public roads that the county maintains in this area, so there are no rights to access that through a county road. The applicant has indicated that this will not be an occupied facility, which if it were an occupied facility, it would require paved access to this property or to this site. So as far as any improvements or road improvements required to get to this site, they could be done through internal roads that they have access through their other approvals. This area is adjacent to Fairfield City. It is not within any annexation policy plans for either Fairfield or for Eagle Mountain, meaning the annexation policy plans generally look out 20 years as far as what will be annexed into their jurisdiction within 20 years. And neither city that is the nearest adjacent city have this area included in an annexation policy plan. The conditions of approval have remained the same for this, except for the added added condition that staff has added on number 9, that a 56-foot reserved access route must be maintained for properties that are completely surrounded by the solar facility. And then it lists those specific parcels. Any questions?
So those blank spots right there are the ones that are is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, if you want to go back one. So if you can see, so the blue area that I've highlighted is the new additional areas. The areas within that blue that are isolated and the gray are the islands that are kind of created. The first one on the northernmost island was original to the approval, and they included an access route for that. The other two are created because of the additional area and the the other approvals that exist.
Do you know why they're not? Why those are islands?
So generally, the facilities are trying to get as many property owners to participate. It's up to the property owner to whether or not to either sell their property or to lease their property for that facility. In these cases, I did hear from one of the property owners. I believe that they are here. They probably are here today to speak to that. They have been contacted by the applicant, and they have not been able to work out an agreement or terms that they would agree with to either lease or sell their property. As I'm sure the applicant can speak to, they do try to get contiguous areas so that they don't have interruptions in their facility. However, it's up to the individual property owners to decide whether or not to participate.
So the applicant doesn't own any of this?
The applicant does, I think, either owns it or has companies that own that property, a majority of that property. The additional properties they do not own. One is owned by the state and others are privately owned.
Okay.
We can ask the applicant about that. When it's their turn.
Yeah. I have a question for council, if I may ask.
Please.
I guess I'm still blown away. So I thought all property had access, right? So that's not the case.
It is not the case.
So
It's up to the owners.
you buy property in the middle of nowhere. You can fly in by helicopter, but that's your only guarantee, right?
Yeah, well, they can also use the historical use. You know, if there's been a historical use there, they might have a prescriptive easement. But yeah, it's up to the property owners to make sure they have access to their property before they buy it.
My grandparents own property up West Canyon. The only way to get to it is hiking on foot. So
But you still had to craft somebody else.
Yep.
Agreements in place.
Okay.
Yeah. Any additional questions for staff before we invite the applicant? Okay. If the applicant is present and would like to come up.
Thank you. My name is Adrienne Bell. I'm with Holland and Hart, and I'm here representing Enyo Renewable Energy. We have a couple of slides that we could show. And really just the one might be helpful just to provide an overview. I would just go to the second slide. That one. That gives an overview of the request tonight to extend the approved conditional use permit boundaries for the Phase 3 project, which is shown in the darker blue. The added parcels are in the lighter blue. And then you can see the approved area from under Phase 1, which is in the green. And that shows you where the reserved access route would be located to provide access to those in-holding parcels. Greg did a good job going over the basics of the proposal. I don't have much more to add to that, but I'm happy to respond to any questions. And we have others from the company who are here who might be able to answer some questions about negotiations with property owners if you have those questions as well.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
So do the two projects, do they work together, Quicksilver and the Mosida Energy with the power plant?
Yes, these are all affiliated entities under Enyo Renewable Energy and will be developed as a larger.
So the
project.
Quicksilver facilities won't be occupied, but that power plant will have staffing on it, correct?
Yeah, and we can talk more about the gas power plant when we get to that application.
Mm-hmm. Additional questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have one?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there any further comments? If not, I'm ready to make a motion.
Sorry, I think that there are some people that have contacted us wanting to speak to this item if you want to entertain public comment.
Kind of the same situation as the previous one. You don't have, it's not a public hearing, but if you want to hear from some people that want to speak, you can go through the same process.
Okay. If it's the feel of the commission to allow more feedback from the public, then we'll take a motion on that.
I think it's important to hear from those affected. So I would say yes, motion to allow public comment.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion and a second, starting with you, Commissioner Harrod.
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes. And there's a number of you who signed up for 3 and 4. So at this time, if you'd like to come up and address the commission, if you could limit your comments to 3, just this item on the Quicksilver Solar, that will be helpful for us as far as separating the 2 in your comments. And like before, we will use the timer and I'd like you to state your name into the microphone. So if you'd like to come up, then please do.
I am Mayor McKinney from Fairfield. So I actually have quite a bit
We need you to
say.
speak into the
Did you
microphone.
guys get your pictures that I sent you?
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
They're coming.
right here. I will try to make it quick and be under 3 minutes. So
Could you state your name into the microphone?
I'm
Make sure
Holly
it was picked
McKinney,
up.
Mayor McKinney from Fairfield.
Thank you.
So I have actually had problems with these solar fields, not this one in particular, but the only way that these solar fields can access this valley is through this road right here on this paper that I'm showing you. It's not designed to accommodate these heavy trucks. And so when the Faraday project went into the very south end of the Cedar Valley, they probably like tripled our amount of traffic. And what they did is they came in and they started getting gravel from out west towards 5 Mile Pass. And they were bringing it into our town, but because of that sharp corner right there on the road, they can't make that turn. And so I gave you this picture here that has that puddle right there. I can't get UDOT to fix this corner because I have arsenic in my valley. And so they don't want to put a culvert under there because then it will run into our stream and it causes issues there. They're working on it, but just one more thing, like my road is not built to accommodate this. Yesterday, as we speak, I had a truck that went off the road. And what happens when they come down this road, they have to, so I think it's important to understand too, is I have 2 major landfills out in my town, and they carry large trucks that come from Intermountain Regional Landfill, and then they also come from North Point Landfill. And so it's a heavy amount of trucks that come out there. Those 2 landfills actually pay to maintain our road. As you can imagine, we're a small town, our budget is small. And we have, you know, if I had to pave that road out of our budget, it would take everything that I had. It's not feasible for us to do this. But it's worked in the past until these solar fields started coming in. But what they have to do is they actually have to stop out west and they have to watch all the traffic that's coming in. So if a truck is coming from one way in Fairfield, they have to actually stop on the highway. That truck has to cross into oncoming traffic, and then it has to, the other truck coming from the landfill or the solar fields, they have to stay back and let the trucks go. So it's like they're operating their own traffic signal. Anyway, we put in $1 million water line, we finished it up in January, and this truck is they're all continually running over it. I can't get UDOT to help me to fix it. They're working on it, but you know, UDOT, Fairfield is the last of their concerns. And so it's really frustrating. But our road is just not built to handle these solar fields, and it is the only way out there. And contrary to what you guys have been told, we do have an annexation policy, and those they do fall in within our annexation policy. I don't believe that we were given adequate notice for this, and the reason that it also frustrates me is, like, this is being permitted for a pond and then asking for a lake. Like, we're covering massive amounts of land out there. This is one of several solar fields that are being permitted out there. And the only way to access them is through Fairfield. And we're not getting any of the revenue off of it. And so we're just being abused by it. And I'm not saying that it's Quicksilver or Annual that's doing it, but they have several applications in. And that is exactly what they're doing right now, is they're adding on to a conditional use permit by more land. And so next thing you know, we've got thousands of acres down there that are being covered by solar fields, and it's not being watched closely. But I don't believe that we were given legal notice. I barely got the notice yesterday, so I actually didn't have time to get a response in. The county should be forced to adopt the highest standard of ordinance in surrounding properties, which would be Fairfields. We have spent a lot of time and money making these ordinances. Is there any way I can continue where there is multiple things that affect my town?
I'm next on the list, and she can use my 3 minutes. Terry Anderson from Intermountain Regional Landfill.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay. They should be forced to use our ordinance. We have spent a lot of time and money making this ordinance, and then our conditional use permit as well. You know, did they do an environmental study? Why do we keep allowing all these solar fields just to cover this massive amount of land? Utah Code 17-27A-506 allows the county to impose reasonable conditions on land use applications in order to mitigate the anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. The solar fields are large, they take years to build, and they are covering thousands of acres. They are utilizing roads that were not designed to accommodate heavy freight traffic at this volume. I would like conditions added that would require them to obtain easements from property owners needed for the width that accommodate large, heavy trucks. This was another problem. Faraday came in, and they're at the very south end of Fairfield, right at Fairfield's border, right where they're surrounding that piece of land. They just came in and they took a 60-foot wide swath of land. It wasn't their easement to take. There's a 30-foot prescriptive easement there. And so they just widened it. They just came in and did it. Nobody watched them. Nobody knew about it. I've tried to contact Faraday. Well, the project that was originally permitted has been sold out like 3 times. And so it's really hard to find anybody to even talk to there. So they're using land. They don't have the easements that are required for these pieces of property. They have not contacted them to get the easements. So that needs to be required. And then a concern besides the roads in Fairfield, in our conditional use permit, we require them to have a decommissioning plan that provides what the specs are for those particular panels. We ask them to provide where they're manufactured, and so they can give us this for the reasons of what chemicals are in those panels and where can they dispose of them. Because right now, the two landfills that they're located next to, one is a municipal use, the other one is a C&D landfill. They can't take them because of the chemicals that are used in these panels. So we'd like to have them tell us what panels are in there, what is required for decommissioning that, and then to also make sure of where they are being produced, that they're not using child labor to produce these. It does have a huge impact on my town, and I hope you guys will consider that when you keep conditional approving these solar fields. They have to come through Fairfield or they have to go through Eagle Mountain, and neither city is prepared to take it. There's sometimes that the units that they bring in close down this road. And so then I have semis backed up on the highway. I've got semis backed up waiting to get on because the units that they are bringing in are so large that they cover the whole amount of road. So that's all I have to say. But we do care. We are fighting against this. We just have not been able to get to the right person to fight it. Thank you.
Any further comment?
This is my least favorite place to be, let me let you know that. My name's Brent Alt. My family are longtime landowners in that Cedar Valley area. I am an active farmer of quite a bit of property in that area. My big concern, along with Mayor McKinney's, 2 years ago when the first project started, I was notified by one of my workers that dozers were going through one of my grain fields. And so I drove out there. I contacted Utah County Roads. Travis said, I'll meet you out there. I don't know his last name, sorry. But his boss came with him. And I said, you're aware that this is a prescriptive easement. You do not own the road. And he said, yeah, we own 30 feet. And I said, no, I pay the property tax on the property under the road. You have a prescriptive easement. And Travis said, well, we'll work on remedying that situation. So as of yet, I haven't heard anything, but they widened that from 30 feet to, we measured it close to 80 feet with no legal action to widen that easement. They took part of my crop, never compensated me for that. So my concern is that Utah County needs to remedy that situation. Me personally, I'm affected. They took over a mile of, I own, from where that Allen's Ranch Road, sorry, I'm a little nervous, where Allen's Ranch Road leaves Fairfield and enters Utah County, I own the first mile of that on both sides. And they widened that road from my property line all the way through for the full mile. I just want to, I have a minute left. Uh-oh, it locked. Okay, I just want to read this. These are my neighbors. So I own property adjacent to IRL landfill. They just want to express serious concerns regarding the proposed amendment to Quicksilver Solar Conditional Use Permit, which would expand the project to 480 acres. IRL is adjacent to this project, and we've already seen firsthand how heavy truck traffic can impact our roads. A previous customer, Faraday, caused significant issues, including road wear, without contributing to maintenance, as well as unsafe driving behavior such as speeding, passing garbage trucks with full loads, and ignoring stop signs. With this expansion, the impact on our roads and community will only increase. It is crucial to ensure that Quicksilver Solar is held accountable for contributing to road maintenance. And thank you. Sorry I'm so nervous, but I appreciate you taking time to listen to us. So,
Oh, thank you for your comments. It's totally understand. We get nervous too. So. Anybody else?
Good evening. Greg Jackson, I'm a resident of Lehigh. My property is the one that's down there on the bottom. It's enclosed on 3 sides. I'm also the chairman of the Lehigh Planning Commission, so I know the drill here. So first, let me say historic use, definitely a thing. Second, staff has recommended access via roads. That is within your power. I certainly understand the difference between administrative and legislative. Deal with this again every single week. Lehigh grows like a weed. This feels like a full-time job, though I'm told I'm a volunteer. That's within your power. I would highly recommend that you exercise that. Conditional use, yes, you have to grant that when it's zoned accordingly, but it's upon you to also make decisions that ensure that the property rights of other adjacent property owners are respected. Otherwise, there's no point to zoning. We should just get rid of the whole concept altogether. And I mean, personally, if I were to be blocked in, I'd eventually end up before a judge to make sure I have access to my road, or excuse me, to my property. So that's a legal battle just waiting to happen, I would argue, if you're not ensuring that those property owners have ready access. Surveying, I'd like to see the assurances that Utah County is taking proper precautions to ensure that all of our property is being properly protected. Given Mr. Alt's example, I don't think that it's beyond the pale to worry that fences start going up not exactly where they should, if there's been some sloppiness already in where those roads are going. I'm sure other property owners beyond myself have thought about and considered getting some surveys out there. I mean, it's a bunch of dirt and weeds for the most part, apart from where you do have some dry farming going on. So you're going to need surveys to ensure that everything falls where it should. Honestly, I will say I was kind of shocked at, not at the approval of this, but at the Board of Adjustment's lack of imposing pretty much anything on Quicksilver to ensure the protection of other properties. And I'll also note that, in kicking this open, it has very much given direction to how this area will develop. We're looking at doing solar panels as well, because, I mean, what am I going to do with my property now, the way that it's locked in? And that is incumbent upon Utah County to think about how that development goes. Of course, property owners, they have their rights, and you need to let them, and you have to respect that. That is a constitutional right that needs to be respected. Also, to the same reason why we use zoning, we do design a little bit how Lehigh falls, and that falls upon you as the county to think about that. From my experience out here, it really does feel like it's been more of the wild, wild west. And given the plans I've seen and looked at on Lehigh City Planning Commission with what the state has planned for roads and the expansion of towns and whatnot, it's an interesting choice that we're opening Pandora's box in the way that we are here. So, in summation, I would really encourage listening to staff on roads. I would think about others, like my own property, which is almost enclosed, at the very least, and surveying. If I were in your shoes, those would be conditions I'd impose. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any need to come forward?
Hi, I'm Valerie Manning, and I own that island up at the top of that blue mass, which is a monopoly. I'm all enclosed. There, when you first initially okayed the first phase, you put in an access road. Well, that's no guarantee to me without a signed easement that's recorded of in and out access to my property. Also, there are concerns regarding the surveys. Is it all going to be, honestly surveyed? What about the environmental aspects of the area, the ecosystem? I would like a 6 to 10 foot fence around my lot. because I would like to do something with my property as a freedom and a right of the Constitution to own property, to use it freely. And I have tried to contact Quicksilver to see if I couldn't begin with easement agreement. And all I got back was they offered me pennies on the dollar to sell my property. It's not for sale. It's never been for sale. I don't intend to sell it. Then they offered me pennies to lease the property. Ridiculous. I want to use my property. I have dreams for that property. And therefore, I would ask that you would consider my property and my rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment? Okay, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion on the item.
Well, I have a question for staff, if that's good. My understanding is that, isn't part of the conditioning permit, isn't there have to be a survey? Has that not been put in county ordinances or things like that?
No, it is not required by county ordinance. Property, obviously, each legal description is supposed to be not overlapping, but that doesn't always exist in the county. It is incumbent upon the property owners and the developers and adjacent property owners to ensure that accurate survey is in place. There are possibilities to require additional surveying if that is needed. But this, just to give you an idea, this area recently, one of the parcels in here, well, let me give you a little better overview. So as you can see, this is a parcel map, and you can see that some areas there aren't overlaps. Other areas, there are definitely some issues with overlaps. The property owner would be liable for any issues with overlapping property on another property owner's property. However, there's also a lot of surveying that may not be completely accurate from one property to another. And it's not necessarily the county hasn't necessarily required that in every situation, but it is something that you could ask for additional surveys but the problem is that if the applicant thinks that their survey is correct and the other property owner thinks that their survey is correct, it's not, the county is going to get pulled into the middle of that argument, and it's not generally the county's position to be in the middle of that argument.
You know, the reason I ask is, you know, I've done a couple, you know, years ago, you know, when I could afford land, but anytime I've ever done a subdivision in a city, there was always a survey that was required.
Correct. That's for subdivisions. They are required to plat that, and then they are also required to ensure that they have title to that property, and in that process we do require a title report to ensure that they're listed as the sole property owner of that property to develop that property. That is something that could be added as a condition. Again, it's difficult for the county to be in the middle of that position because it is something that they could require surveying. But again, if there are discrepancies between overlapping properties, is what the problem becomes: how does the county get in? Is the county supposed to be involved in that process? And I'm guessing that you probably saw the reaction.
Well, the problem is anybody that surveyed knows that once you start surveying, I mean, the lines move. I mean, I know even within cities will move 10 feet, and so, but So if you go down the line, I guess, is, how are you protecting, somebody that has, if they think the fence is on their yard, then it's up to them. Then they have the rights to go through court and sue for that. And I mean, is that how justice is
Correct.
supposed to be done?
So the applicant has title to that property that they are going to want to develop. If there is a discrepancy, it is a dispute between property owners, not the county.
That's considered a private, but there is a way for them to seek justice, and that's through the court. That's through the court system.
Correct. Anything else, Dan?
Any additional questions for staff?
I don't know about staff, questions for staff, but Mayor Fairfield brought up some really important points, I think, that would be good to be addressed by the applicant if possible.
Sure. If the applicant would like to come up.
I am happy to respond to the comments that were raised during the public comment period. So in terms of access, our project biases infrastructure that is on the eastern side of the project. So in addition to the property that is owned or leased in Utah County, Enyo has property also through Eagle Mountain, and so the project actually starts in Eagle Mountain near the Mercer substation and continues down. Our access route will be through Eagle Mountain, improving Lake Mountain Road, which we'll discuss with the next application, and biasing traffic and infrastructure on that boundary. We're not planning to go through Fairfield. I understand there were issues with another project and construction traffic. That's not our intent, and we don't anticipate any issues in that regard. In terms of surveying, we will do our own surveys as part of this project. These projects, they are hundreds of millions of dollars in value. Any investor or lender will require that we locate all of our improvements within our property and that we're not encroaching or otherwise extending beyond where we have legal rights. That's just a part of project development and will be part of the process. In terms of access, we've agreed with the access route, we've agreed to the 56-foot access set aside that Greg included in his staff report. So from that perspective, we're fine with that condition, and I think that addresses the concern with allowing access to reach some of those in-holding parcels. The other thing I want to raise is that many of these parcels are subject to restrictive covenants. You can't do anything with this property unless you legally subdivide it to remove the restrictive covenants, because they were illegally subdivided many years ago, and all that can be done on them is agriculture. No structures or development can happen until a subdivision is approved to remove the restrictive covenant, or until the property is consolidated with another property that is not subject to a restrictive covenant and therefore made whole, so to speak. So in order to subdivide under the county's current requirements, you have to provide paved access to that parcel. And that is why this portion of the county is zoned mining and grazing. It's intended for types of development that are not near urban areas or other parts of the county. Access is limited, coupled with the restrictive covenants that were put in place as a result of illegal subdivisions in the past. There are a lot of hurdles to development that have nothing to do with our project. So I just want to flag that as an issue. We worked for many years to resolve that issue for the project site, and we worked with Greg on consolidating the parcels and removing the restrictive covenant. So it is possible to do it, but it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money to do so.
Can you map out that access route that you intend to take from Eagle Mountain?
So it's hard to tell on that map. So if you see where the yellow I'd actually go back to the other site, the map that was just up, that.
Satellite on the one map that you were showing, the interactive map?
We could do that, you're right. But it would basically follow Lake Mountain Land Road, which is to the east, which is right around in that location. And would go up into Eagle Mountain.
Are you looking for the access, the paved access of for them, or are you looking for access to the individual islands?
The anticipated access to the project area.
Oh,
It would be Lake Mountain Road.
Let me pull this up.
What is your plan to enforce that access, that it's only, I mean, I drive trucks, so I could be considered a dumb truck driver, you know, and I know truck drivers take the route they want to for the most part. How are you going to regulate that?
I think, given where our project is located, that makes the most sense. It wouldn't make sense to go all the way across into Fairfield and then cut back down and around across roads that are of even lower quality than what Lake Mountain Land is, or Lake Mountain Road is, apologies.
So you're talking about taking this road that is yellow with some red, not the one that is yellow-green?
So their access, so on the right side, their access, I'm not showing that, you can't see my pointer. So their access comes through Eagle Mountain.
Right.
And then that they've worked with Eagle Mountain for that road. Then it leaves Eagle Mountain here, actually here, this is Lake Mountain Road, comes down Lake Mountain Road, and then leaves Lake Mountain Road there to access their project there.
Right.
Let me go back to here. So we're talking project area that is in this area, correct? And comes down, goes out to Eagle, sorry.
It would be straight down there. It would come down to Eagle
down
Mountain
here.
and then come to the south, and then we'd
Oh,
connect
south,
in,
okay.
so.
Lake Mountain Road is here, comes, when it leaves Eagle Mountain, it comes to here, down, and then it leaves Lake Mountain Road in somewhere in this area.
And then we would
comes
have,
down.
I mean, we don't know the details yet, but we would have access points for the project depending on, where it works with the layout.
Correct. The pavement would have to be from an existing paved road all the way to their project. This is crossing over into the other conditional use application, but that paved access would have to be paved all the way to the natural gas facility. So all the way to their project, which that project is all of this area, the solar and the natural gas facility. Does that help?
It does. Would it be, I don't know, permissible for us to put that as a condition? That the access would be on a road that is designed for large vehicular traffic?
I believe it's
It is
already.
not, it's so on this conditional use, it is not on there. On the next conditional use, there is a requirement that they construct and maintain that road as a Class B road within the county and a Class C road within the city.
So item 7 says the applicant shall be responsible for any road improvements and/or maintenance of county roads. Does that not apply to this one?
It does apply. If they were only doing the solar project, they would still be required, but not necessarily required to pave it. They would have to improve it. But the pavement requirement kicks in under the next conditional use where it's an occupied structure.
But not as something that we would add to the first one to say, well, we'll take this route or you'll take that route.
So it is, there's not, whatever route that they use to access their project, they would have to maintain, and after the project was completed, they would have to return that to that state they'd have to fix any issues that they've created with the road.
And this Lakeview Mountain, I'm sorry, I don't remember what it's called, but that road, is that a UDOT
Lake
road?
Mountain Road.
Lake Mountain Road, it's a
Lake
county.
Yeah, it's a county unpaved road currently.
Okay.
So it is a Class B road, but it's unpaved. This is, again, crossing over to the next conditional use. As part of that project, they will be required to pave that to county standards and maintain that for the duration of that project and completion of the construction of that project. Once that project is complete, again, crossing over to the next item, that project is intended to have, if I remember, 15 to 20 employees, and that would be the traffic that would exist for that project. Again, I know that this is talking about the Faraday project, but after the Faraday project is complete, traffic on that road will be minimal, and they will have to be, they would be required to do any improvements that from the damage caused to that road, using it for the construction of that project.
Does the county have any assurances from the project owner that those improvements will happen, like a monetary?
It would be required, I mean, it would be something to get the certificate of occupancy. It would be a condition that the Public Works would review the road, and generally they would go out and assess whether or not there were any improvements that would need to be done based on the construction of the project. So yes, there are assurances based on permitting processes.
Okay. Additional questions?
So it was mentioned that it was not part of the annexation policy plan, but there's been an opposing viewpoint on that. What's the process to verify annexation plans and include them?
We try to maintain all current annexation policy plans. Our GIS department does an excellent job. This is currently what we show as an annexation policy plan for that area.
As in the hash marks?
Yes, the hash mark. So, so the media dispute boundary, let me take those off. So this is Eagle Mountain. This is what we currently have based on our records for Fairfield. That may differ based on their approvals, but this is what we have on record.
And the annexation process requires landowner agreement, or does
The
not?
annexation policy plan they do not have jurisdiction over that property. They do not have rights to deny any improvements or any development of that property.
Right.
It is only a plan that identifies in the next 20 years, this is the area that they anticipate annexing within their jurisdiction.
But they can't annex it unless the
Property-
property owner wishes to be annexed.
There are different processes, but generally, the most accepted way is for a property owner to seek annexation of that property.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be appropriate to review the next application before we vote on this one? Because they seem like there's a lot of overlapping or things that kind of work together.
As in, you would consider your vote for one based on the information in the other?
That's a good question.
Has Eagle Mountain weighed in on the increased traffic there?
We did not receive, I was contacted by the planning department in Eagle Mountain. They did not have comment from us. They are aware of the project. They are participating with Quicksilver. With improvements and development plans within their jurisdiction. So they are aware of what's going on, and they have, and I'm sure the applicant can probably talk to this more clearly, but they have some agreements in place for the improvements of that road and access to their facility.
That's for the Quicksilver project. But the other project, I guess, doesn't it kind of rely on those improvements?
It does. It would be required.
So if item 3 fails, item 4 is
So
impacted.
generally, it would be a requirement, so it would be a condition of approval. So they would have to have a Class B paved Class B road in place in order for them to meet the conditions of the approval. If they do not get that in place, that they cannot
There won't be an
move forward.
occupancy
They would eventually, like if they couldn't get it in place before the expiration date, the conditional use would expire. So as it's currently written, the approval of that, of the next conditional use would be reliant on them improving that road and paving that road to another paved road to their, and all the way to their project. And having that be a dedicated county road. So the area that they, or city road, sorry. So the area that they leave the existing county road, they would have to have that area paved, improved, and dedicated to the county for access to that project. And so it would have to be also accepted by the county commission. So they would have to go through a process to amend the official county road map to show that road and have that road exist, basically on the, and accepted by the county. Help?
So with the discussions we had in the previous applications with time limits and stuff like this I think is showing a 5-year time limit. Is that correct?
Currently, it is 2029. That was the original approval. There was not a request to extend that approval from what was originally granted.
Right. And so I guess, with the previous in mind where they've had 5 years, to do this kind of stuff, is that something we feel comfortable sticking with? Or, we could modify that if we wanted to, right?
That was their request, but yeah, so it is up to the the planning commission to determine whether that request is something that would be acceptable and reasonable to grant. Generally, and the applicant probably can speak to this better than I can, there is a longer process that they are required to go through connecting to the existing power lines. That takes an extended period of time for them to get through that process. So that's why they've, every development that we've had come through for solar has requested an extended approval time.
So I guess one other concern that was brought up is the probability, or not the probability, but the potential of contamination or whatever from, solar panels that could be damaged during the decommissioning process or anything like that. What safeguards are in place to address that potential?
So as part of our original conditional use permit, we have a decommissioning plan requirement, and we'll prepare a decommissioning plan and submit it as part of our building permit application that will address how the site will be decommissioned, how the materials will be either recycled or disposed of, and how the property will be reclaimed. So that will all be spelled out at the time we know what panel type we're using, what actual facilities will be located on the property.
And usually there's a bond associated with that.
Yes, we have a bond in our, I believe we do. I
Yeah,
have to
so-
double check. I think
so,
that's right.
Under the conditions, under number 8, there is a decommissioning plan that would be required, and that there is the language in here. A decommissioning plan shall include provisions for the removal of all structures, foundations, electrical equipment, internal or perimeter access roads, restoration of soil and vegetation of disturbed areas, along with a plan acceptable to county, ensuring financial resources will be available to fully decommission the site.
Right.
And to address one of the other concerns about studies and stuff like that, in the packet, I'm pretty sure I saw there were some extensive studies with, groundwater monitoring, wildlife corridors and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that correct?
As part of the original conditional use permit application that you all reviewed about a year ago, we did submit extensive environmental site assessment studies and looked at a number of issues, which is standard for the development of a project of this size. So all we're asking at this time is to extend the project to include those two additional areas. All of the other elements of the project remain the same.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay,
Okay.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. As to your question of whether or not to hear the second item, we have had connected items where we've gone back and reconsidered, so if there's no objection from staff, I think that may be in order here to go to that second presentation.
Sure. Let me just pull up the map or the presentation. All right. This is also an application for conditional use. This is for an electrical power generation facility. The parcel that it's the proposed subject parcel boundaries are kind of indicated on the map. However, the area and that acreage is about 1,100 acres for that parcel. However, the project area that they're looking to develop is only on approximately 34 acres of that project area or subject parcel. This is kind of just showing where it is in reference to the proposed and existing approvals. Again, a little farther out. This facility is proposed to include 12 turbines. The applicant has indicated that these may be phased depending on power demands and the need for those turbines to be in place to generate enough power to accommodate the off-taker. So the applicant has also indicated that these turbines are anticipated to run 20 to 40% of the time. So they're not going to be running full time based on the applicant's application, but they will be run in conjunction with the rest of the facility to maintain adequate power to supply the off-taker is what has been indicated. The applicant has also requested that their termination date be extended 5 years to 2030. Again, this area is not included in an annexation plan as far as our records indicate. So just to go over a couple staff review items, the facility is going to be an occupied facility. 15 to 20 employees will be on site at the completion of the development of this project. As an occupied facility, this will be required to include the paved road access. Again, that kind of is shown somewhat here through Eagle Mountain onto Lake Mountain Road and then to their facility. A total distance of about 6 miles is what is anticipated. This facility, the turbines are anticipated to have stacks that exceed our minimum height requirement. Those are, and the applicant can speak to this probably better than I can, but based on their application, those are, the final height of those have not been determined, but are dependent upon air quality requirements in order to make sure that they are able to meet whatever air quality requirements exist for that project. They also have have indicated that they will have a water tank. Both of these are additional conditional uses that I was not aware of when first the height of those towers or the water tank. And so I wasn't able to let them know early enough in this process to help them submit an application for both of those as well, so that those applications will have to come to you at a later date. They can be put on the same application, but they will be required to receive separate approvals for the water tank and the stacks. The conditions, so there have been a number of conditions that have been included. There are many state and federal licenses and permits and requirements that would need to be met. Those have been indicated in the conditions. The improvements to the road have been included. The applicant has indicated mitigation measures in their application, 13 different mitigation measures that they've indicated. They have also been included as required conditions of this application. And then the separate conditional use requirements for the additional height. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
I just have, we might not. Are the power purchase agreements already in place? Or, I mean, this is, it's for people that don't understand the power industry. I mean, I just kind of know it just because I tried once in a previous license. A lot of this, you have to have this in place before you can even start to negotiate power purchase agreements. You've got to have your line agreements in, and so, but you have to have all the stuff in place. Is that my understanding? You've got to have all your ducks in a row before, so that it's not a certainty this goes in, but you have to go through all the work before that. That's kind of how it is.
That may be a good question for after the applicant comes up.
Oh, sorry. I forget that this is.
So they have to come back up again.
Yeah.
Yep. Would you like to restate your question after the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
So I guess a question for Greg. We're going through this process without knowing the height of the stacks, exhaust stacks and stuff, which seems to me, if we approve this, then the chances of us denying that approval later would be kind of backwards.
So again, a conditional use is a permitted use that you're allowed to add reasonable restrictions to mitigate negative impacts. So they know that it's going to be over 40 feet. And if you feel like there is something about that you're not comfortable with, then this doesn't tie your hands for future approvals. They would be required to obtain that conditional use. However, I wanted to make you aware so that that anticipation of those stacks or the water tank will be coming in a future application, yes.
I guess my question to that, if you ask council, is that, we already have these. I mean, it would be very hard for us to have justification to deny it. Is that correct? Because we already have several power plants in the valley.
Yeah, you would be hard pressed to deny it, but
we
imposing conditions.
We can
is a
put
whole nother-
reasonable conditions on it.
Exactly. That's where you want to focus your effort. Yeah. Devising conditions is one of the most important things you can do on these uses.
Are there power plants in the county, though? Aren't they in municipalities?
Aren't there? Is Payson, is that in?
Municipalities have some. Springville does, for example.
So I guess, is there a difference between, I mean, if there's not an existing power facility in the county, then, that's
So
different.
we do not have an existing power plant within the unincorporated area. of Utah.
Everything, all of them that I'm familiar with are in incorporated areas.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think the last meeting we had, somebody brought up the power supply, and it was like Rocky Mountain and potentially one other provider, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there are several different suppliers, but Rocky Mountain Power is the one that would probably be the lines that the transmission lines for this project are owned by them.
Any more questions?
I don't think so. Not right now.
There will be more.
There will be.
So we'd like to invite the applicant to come up, and if I have one question so far, if you'd like to address that as part of your presentation.
I do.
You do. Okay, great. Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioners, good evening. I'm Greg Probst, consultant for the applicant. We can go to the next slide. This project was originally intended to be a large-scale solar project to address the power needs of some of the data centers that would logically be interested in obtaining green power and being able to show to their customers that they were getting green energy. In the process of developing this facility, we historically became aware of a problem that Rocky Mountain Power Pacificor has, which is that they're not going to be able to construct the sort of interconnection facilities that not only our project, but any other significant solar, or for that matter, any other significant size power project would need. They're not going to be able to construct them until 2031 is what we have most recently been told. That has put the entire community of data center developers in an awful position. At least one has already canceled their intent to go forward. What we were originally trying to provide a good quantity of solar and battery storage power to a data center project so that they would have the flexibility to be able to work with the utility for the balance of the demand and use our renewable power to show that they were partly at least a green facility. Now, in light of the inability to get constructed in a timely manner, it's put them in a terrible position. There's been a huge hubbub at the legislature on this subject with competing bills and not much satisfactorily resolved from the point of view of the community. But in view of the problem of delivering only part of the load for a data center customer, what we started to work on was a substitute process where we would have not only the solar and the battery storage to be able to move part of that solar power into the evening hours, but also add turbines so that we could provide load during all the evening hours as well, and firm power round the clock to the customer, reliable, and so that they would be in a position to be able to finance their sort of facilities in the interim before 2031 comes along. So what we have that is driving the situation is sort of a development nightmare, and with terrible adverse consequences for all those companies that are trying to do that sort of business. We're trying to support those efforts. To just speak about our project, we're trying to do a combined project that will give 500 megawatts approximately of round-the-clock power. That means we need to have about 1,000 megawatts of solar, 800 megawatts of battery backup, and a combustion turbine natural gas fuel facility that will handle somewhere over 500 to 600 megawatts so that we can provide reliable round-the-clock power for these customers that are going to need it. So it's to put us all into a position where these facilities will be in a position to go forward, build the data centers, provide the extra tax base for the broader community of munis in the county. And so what we're trying to do is support that process. And that's the reason that we've added the gas facility to the pre-existing solar facilities that we've already been before this body several times to get approvals on. And what we've had to do is to grow the facility to put us into a position to have sufficient solar, sufficient battery, sufficient backup gas fuel generation, such that we can meet this 500 megawatt firm round-the-clock power. Now, it's possible that we may not end up needing all of that. It is possible that maybe our deal ends up being 300 megawatts for the first couple of data customers. So we might end up building in phases. But fundamentally, we're trying to put ourselves into a position to make sure that we can address the real needs that these customers are going to have. And that's what's driving us. So could you look at the next slide? Greg, could you look at the next slide? Thanks. This is a concept site plan that shows we would have up to 12 combustion turbines and related facilities. We'd have a control building, we'd have a warehouse, we'd have an ammonia storage place, we'd have gas facilities. We'd have everything that we need in order to produce the backup power that we need to firm up all the solar and the battery energy that we're getting ready to provide for customers. It is possible that we might be able to do the project with less than 12 turbines, as we've previously described to Greg and his staff. We're hopeful that we can do that. That turns on a very sophisticated and long-term modeling process that you have to consider weather, what solar facilities behave like in the winter, on short days and in cloudy conditions, and on the other end of the spectrum, what they behave like in the summertime with long days and lots of sunshine. You have to be able to adjust to all those different circumstances to end up with a flat 500 megawatt product that your customers can totally rely on for their multi-billion-dollar financing. Because if it's not reliable, they'll never get their financing. So that's the goal and the point of the project in the big picture. So this facility would be actually around 3.5 miles south of Eagle Mountain City boundary line. And we'd be using Lake Mountain Road for access down to the gas facility. There's a couple of more miles, another good 2.5, almost 3 miles that we'd be paving inside of Eagle Mountain. I want to kind of take a little bit of a detour just for a second and address a couple of other points. You know, on the previous application, we can access the solar project. We have a part of it up in Eagle Mountain. We can access that directly from Pony Express Road, which is a paved road. And a related point is that we just got an agreement approved by Eagle Mountain City 2 weeks ago. Pony Express Road will be paved right up to the solar project at the north end in Eagle Mountain City. We're really looking at a situation here where we're working partly in Eagle Mountain City, partly down into the county property. But for road access, we'll be constructing about a 6-mile long road, and we'll need to have a road agreement both with Eagle Mountain City and with the county. And we fully plan on doing that. We don't do anything until we get those road access agreements totally negotiated, agreed, and approved. That's a foundation for being able to move ahead, and especially in this case where it's a long road. We have 2 jurisdictions, and we also have to, at the very southern end of where Lake Mountain Road curves, we have to turn west on a small easement and go another mile south to the location, actually about 1.5 miles to the location of our power plant. So this will all be paved. And in terms of water supplies for the project, we already have 1,000 acre-feet that came with the rights for 1,000 acre-feet that came with a parcel that we have up in Eagle Mountain. We do have the ability to build a water pipeline to supply the project with that quantity of water. We actually are not going to need anything like that quantity of water. And I'll explain it a little bit later when we talk about the turbines. But we may, if we need to, build a water pipeline from the location, the current point of diversion, and or the city system up in Eagle Mountain, all the way down to the project facility, and also put a wastewater return line all the way back to Eagle Mountain facilities for disposal of wastewater. Now, the other alternative on wastewater is that we may take a look at, on water, we may take a look at working with the state engineer and seeing if we can put in a well down in the vicinity of our power plant and move the point of diversion from that Eagle Mountain property down to the vicinity of our power plant, put the well in there and not have to run the pipeline all that distance. If we do run the lines, in general, we would run both the pipeline and the water line and the wastewater line along the generally parallel to the intended route for our high voltage transmission line that will be moving back up to Eagle Mountain to an existing substation, Pacific Core substation, where we actually have a signed interconnection agreement with the utility already to interconnect in one of the bays on their existing substation. On the wastewater, as I indicate in the slide, we will treat wastewater on site. We will either hold it and either truck it or pipe it to Eagle Mountain City. In the case of the sanitary wastewater, we would be doing probably septic on site. In the case of looking at natural gas, the Kern River pipeline runs down within a few hundred feet of our intended plant location. And we've been coordinating with Kern River already. We believe that that supply for gas for this facility is going to be very achievable. The electric transmission, you see on the map the route that's the transmission line going up to the existing substation, as I mentioned. So this is the sort of infrastructure that would be involved in making it possible to put in, a substantial gas field facility. Now I'll indicate just generally that on air quality matters, we are fully meeting both the technology-based standards and the ambient standards. We'll be using LM6000 PF Plus turbines with dry low emission technology, which is the cleanest technology that I believe is available. We've been very involved in working with the DAQ already on the permitting process. We have our permit application in. We've been working on dispersion modeling. We have dispersion modeling results back, and we know that we can meet the air quality standards and not have a violation of either hourly standards or annual standards. We've already purchased emissions offsets so that we won't have any increase in emissions. I would just indicate in terms of project benefits that we're going to be a very reliable source of energy. We're going to be creating a lot of financial opportunity in the area. There'll be 300 to 500 people working on the project as it's being constructed. There'll be 10 to 15 permanent employees on site. There'll be a lot of tax benefits for the county. And I think, frankly, that constructing the improvements on Lake Mountain Road will open up an area and make it possible to do additional development down into the corridor that would be served by Lake Mountain Road down in that vicinity. And in general, I just indicate we're not going to be a major source of air emissions. We're going to be a minor source, staying under the required thresholds. We've got plans to make sure we're not going to be generating dust. We're not going to be using prime agricultural land. We're not going to be placing huge demand on county infrastructure. Over the long term, it's a very modest number of employees, a very efficient facility, and it makes it possible for us to provide the quality power that our customers are going to need out into the future. So, and so modest traffic as well. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Before we go to questions from the applicant, given the length of the meeting, I move that we take a 5-minute recess and then reconvene for questions.
Here.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Call this back to order and reconvene. If the applicant would like to return to the podium, and if we have questions are there questions for the applicant?
I'm okay.
You're good? Okay. Either of you have questions?
So I guess the one question I had is I guess I was confused. Originally, it was showing the water line being extended from Eagle Mountain and a wastewater line back, but is that cooling water going back to Eagle Mountain?
Yes. Greg, do you want to talk about the water and wastewater? And how it operates in the
Because it
plant?
just wouldn't be viable to try to push your sewer back to Eagle Mountain. So the wastewater line, is that cooling water that would be returned to Eagle Mountain?
There's a relatively small amount of wastewater, quite honestly. In this is simple cycle technology. We're not going to run combined cycles. We're not going to have a steam loop and a whole lot of water disposal that needs to happen. The only water disposal will be the inlet cooling blowdown during hotter than 60 degrees. You need to have it's like same as a swamp cooler. You could think about it like that. You introduce vapor into the inlet of your combustion turbine. It drives the temperature way down, and you get more power out of the turbine that way. So that blowdown from the cooler is the only thing we really have to dispose of. Everything else is it can be taken to sanitary on site, and the other water that goes into the machine is spray intercooling technology, and it just increases the power coming out of the machine, but there's no disposal of wastewater involved. So it's very minor. In fact, it's probably only ballpark around 20 acre-feet a year, so a very modest amount.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, thank you to the applicant. All right, I think we have a few people who may have come for this item. If the commission would like to accept comment from the audience, we can move to that. Or is there any objection to that? Okay, then at this time, the commission will hear public comments on this item. If anyone from the public would like to address the commission, you're welcome to come forward and state your name into the microphone.
Mayor McKinney again. Just want to make sure that you guys do understand. We did pass an annexation policy August 14th. I'm not sure why you don't know about that, but it does include that area. I know there's a power issue in the valley. I know that there's solar fields coming. All I'm asking is please keep in mind the impact that it does have on Fairfield and that it does have on Eagle Mountain, because I know that all the construction that goes to Facebook, which is just north of their solar fields, I also think it's fair to understand too that they are permitted about 380 acres in Fairfield to have solar fields. Adjacent to that is their battery storage, which was allowed in Eagle Mountain. And so what they want to do is go through Facebook to get to that battery storage. Any construction that comes to Facebook, they have to come, most of their gravel comes from west of Fairfield, and then it goes down Tiffany Lane and then over to Facebook, because Eagle Mountain does not want them going through city center because of the congestion that's already on Eagle Mountain Boulevard. And I'm sure you guys have heard about the traffic in Eagle Mountain. But I think it's fair to say that the conditions should be that they have allowance from the towns that they're going to go through, so they don't impact them like our town has done. I also think that you guys should consider that we've worked with Enyo for years, and they actually provided a conditional use permit to us that was one of the most thorough ones that our attorney, Todd Sharon, has ever looked at. We've had WC3 look at it and go over it. Is there a reason that you guys could not adopt that conditional use permit, knowing that it's had several eyes on it and that we know exactly what's in it, instead of wondering what's permitted and what's happened? I mean, it might be a good thing for you guys to look at and say, yeah, let's adopt that, and adopt our ordinance that is for solar and for battery, because they helped develop it. You know, they know exactly what's in it. But it's gone through a lot of eyes looking at it. So anyway, I'm just asking, just be mindful of what this is doing to my town, and because the Faraday one has impacted us a lot, and I don't know, those other two pink corners that's right next to the landfill, are they solar fields too? The dark pink, all of that, yeah. Those aren't solar fields? What are they highlighted for? Just for your GS, because there are solar fields planned up there. Do you guys have any solar fields that are planned to go on that side of Fairfield? Anyway, they're all connected. So just keep that in mind of what you're doing to towns around it, or let us annex them in. So thank you for everything you guys do. I know it's a thankless job. I understand that fully. So have a
You
good
just
night.
thanked us.
All right, any additional comment from the public? Okay, seeing none, well, that painting is crooked in the back. Bring it back to the commission.
So the Quicksilver is is amending an already existing conditional use permit. So trying to go back and combine, is that right?
Yes, it is an amendment. Most of the conditions are similar to what was existing. The only additional addition to the conditions for that permit or for that approval was, let me get to that really quick. The requirement for the 56-foot right-of-way reservation for access to the islands.
And then just kind of another side question. When we get properties that straddle boundaries, county and cities and stuff, is there a procedure? Who takes precedent? What's the procedure in those situations?
Each are separate approval processes. They
Yeah.
have to, generally, they don't cross over. We have been in, as far as some of the other things going on in Eagle Mountain, we have been in contact with their planning department regarding some of those things. However, they cannot impose conditions on us, and we do not impose conditions on them. However, in working through this process, generally, we try to work together with other jurisdictions to make sure that if there are certain requirements that overlap, or like road improvements or things of that nature, we try to ensure that the city's requirements are the ones that, because sometimes our requirements are less restrictive and theirs are more restrictive, and generally we try to ensure that if that property is going to be within that jurisdiction, then we try to ensure that they meet their requirements for development.
So kind of setting the stage for if the property was annexed, that it would be a smooth process.
Correct. A lot of times this happens when there are islands within jurisdictions and that haven't been annexed, and so they will come and ask for improvements or development of their property, and we generally rely on the surrounding jurisdiction to for their development standards in order to develop that infrastructure or roads or improvements to their conditions rather than ours. So in this case, there's not overlap between the two jurisdictions. For the approvals of this process, Eagle Mountain is going through their own process for the development of this project, and the county is going through their own as well.
Okay.
So on condition number 9 of maintaining the 56-foot reserved access route, that seems pretty vague. Is there, I guess if my property was the one being the island there and knowing, I guess there's no requirement to provide access, I would hope that, I don't know, that would at least be traversable, that access 56 foot, but there's nothing there that requires that. Is that right?
As far as installing an access road,
Right.
There again, this is private property. It's there's not a county road there. Generally, there are going to be internal roads that the developer will probably have. I don't know, they can speak to that. The reason that it wasn't specified is there are multiple routes that they could use to get that, and I didn't want to include a requirement that forced them into a specific alignment of that road, to give the existing property owners, both the developer and also the property owners within there, to kind of agree to the right access for that.
So there's no existing access that we're trying to preserve. It's that they need to make sure that there is access.
Yeah, so not that we have, as far as our records go, there might be, again, as our council has indicated, there might be individual agreements, there might be existing accesses that are prescriptive in nature. However, there are not any existing roads, and I'm not aware of easements that are in place for access to those properties. So that is something that the developer and the property owners would need to work out together.
Do you have any additional questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Or the applicant? I think we've already done that part, so. Okay, so we have the two items which will need separate motions, but we can look at the conditions that have been attached to each one. Are there any additional conditions that the commission would like to explore for either item?
The point was brought up that a lot of the trucks are coming from the west, and that's why they take the one route there. Do we know for sure that that they're going to take the route that is going to be paved there?
Or can we put a condition in place to say?
Yeah, is
you
there
need to
anything
go
that we
this way?
can require? I mean, we can't tell truck drivers necessarily what to do, but I don't know.
So probably a couple things to that point. There are not, like, as you can see, the red areas are where the county has roads on the official county road map. Access from the west would have to be granted by the individual property owners in order to cross their property for access to that. The access to this site is obviously kind of what they're going to develop and have to maintain. To address some of those concerns, you could include a condition that the maintenance and restoration of any roads used for the construction of the facility would have to be assessed at the beginning of the project and restored at the end of the project.
Well, I would think that the owner, developer could, they could create a barrier to prevent traffic coming across any areas.
They could.
And that way you just couldn't access it, especially with a truck, so, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there, you could add a condition that an approved access, construction access be maintained, that they submit an access route and they maintain that access route.
They submit an access route to the county and that needs to be approved?
Yeah, so I would leave it up to Public Works mainly, because Public Works has probably the experience to be able to assess and make sure that the route is suitable. They could work with the adjacent jurisdiction if necessary to look at that route to make sure that it is acceptable to the adjacent jurisdiction, and then to maintain that as either have the improvements completed before the development of the project, and generally that's probably going to be the case because fire requirements would require an access road that's meets their requirements in order to start development of a project. So those improvements would have to generally be done prior to starting the construction of that project. But you could include a condition that access, construction access, be approved by Public Works, and that the maintenance of that road.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we're going to remember all the things that you just suggested in there.
Yeah,
So
can
may
we,
have to
is there a way
refer
to get
the
that
minutes.
written?
Sure, I would probably just say that an access,
That-
sure, I mean, yeah.
That an access, a preferred access route
Be approved by
be
Public
approved by
Works.
Public Works.
And any roads that
that-
are impacted be maintained and
With
returned to
input from adjacent cities or something, I mean, something so that, so that Fairfield is at least consulted.
In coordination with adjacent jurisdictions? Is that something we can do?
With the, I mean,
I would probably restrict it in consultation. If you require the adjacent jurisdiction to have an approval,
No.
Right.
then that
With the
makes it
input.
very difficult for that to work, so. And we try to, as much as we can, we try to consult adjacent jurisdictions.
Right.
And obviously, there are definitely times in that doesn't work out adequately, but we do our best to try and consult with other jurisdictions as much as possible.
Well, and I would hope that because the applicants have heard the concerns from Fairfield and they would, much like we express the concern to Snowbird and stuff, to continue to be good neighbors and stuff like that, to do the best in their abilities to respect the concerns that Fairfield has, even though if you're not having trucks go through there, everybody wants good neighbors, and I think that's a reasonable request, and I feel like you guys would honor that,
So, should we, I'll make a motion that we approve with that additional condition and all the conditions as listed already on there for the Quicksilver Solar application.
You may need to be just a little bit more specific
Right.
on that condition, so we can refer to the minutes or to the staff recommendation on it, but we need to put something in there to know what condition we're referring to.
Okay. Do you have something written?
So the 3 additional conditions, are you talking about just the additional conditions? And, okay, so the first one would be that an access route be approved by Public Works. The second one, that adjacent jurisdictions be consulted when developing that access route. And the last one would be that the maintenance and restoration of any roads used for the construction of the facility. Accurate?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Anybody catch anything else that needs to go on?
I think that's good.
I think that.
Okay.
Okay, so now I move to approve the recommendation with those additional conditions in addition to the ones listed already here.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, then let's start with Commissioner Love.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that was the Quicksilver item number 3, and now we move to item number 4, which also needs a motion. There are several conditions that are included for that one, including there's a road construction use agreement for the construction of Lake Mountain Road, so that is in there. And so is the decommissioning plan, so I know both of those were brought up. On-site vehicular traffic maintenance. You see any other conditions that would be appropriate?
The only question I have about it is the one that we don't really have an answer to is how high the building would be. And I'm not sure how we could, at this point, impose a condition on it.
Yeah, there isn't a way. That's a separate conditional use application. As that application comes to before you, that conditions can be applied specific to those requests.
I mean, and this is a question more for the applicant and stuff like that. Is there a timeline that you guys are looking at that you have any idea how quick that can come in? Because again, my opinion is if we approve this, then we're our hands are going to be basically tied to allow some type of a height. You know, we're going to be, it's going to be difficult for us to restrict the height of your exhaust stacks if we approve this, in my opinion. You know, and so I'm kind of like, ew.
Well, the height is currently restricted to the limit in the code. So we're fixed by 40 feet.
Correct.
So we can't go higher than that currently. When we come back, which we hope to do within the next month or two with a request to go potentially up to 80 feet, then at that point you would have the opportunity to evaluate the additional height and whether there are conditions that are appropriate to impose in connection with that application and approval.
But the range that we're talking, though, is between 40 and 80. We're not talking North Salt Lake, Kennecott, 1,000 feet.
No.
Okay.
That's what we're.
55 to 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any concerns.
Any from you? All right. Then would someone like to make a motion on this item? It's probably written in here toward the end.
Just made the last two.
I'll make the motion that the Utah County Planning Commission approve conditional use application CU 2025-01, a request for a natural gas power plant as an electrical power generation plant located at approximately 14400 west and 2200 south in the Cedar Valley area of unincorporated Utah County, subject to staff findings included in section 4 of staff report and the following minimum conditions, items 1 through 9.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Harrod?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, motion passes for Mosida Energy, item number 4, which brings us to our public hearing item. The land use amendment for Sundance Mountain Resort. And we begin with a presentation from staff. And once again, we thank everyone who came to comment on this issue for your contributions to our discussion.
So Greg has this one also. I'll let him get his notes organized there, and
You sent him over there this time.
yeah, I came over here to speed this thing up. I'm just kidding.
Where were you 2 hours ago?
Seriously. Just as a reminder that, yeah, as we mentioned, this will require a public hearing, but we can do the staff presentation first. The applicant's here, has sat through all this and gets his chance in the spotlight, so we'll let him make any proposals or presentations and then open up for a public hearing.
Yep. Where is the applicant, if the applicant would like to? Good job. It's a long wait. Thanks for staying. Okay.
Again, Greg Robinson for Community Development. So 4.06 or 4.60 is our requirements for off-street parking. Currently, our ordinance requires that all parking for a use or facility be maintained on site. As you know, the applicant Sundance has a resort. They have a lot of seasonal uses and a lot of peak parking demand based on their location, being in narrow canyons and in kind of less developable areas, which is kind of the point and where they're being located. The applicant is looking to utilize off-site parking in order to meet the parking requirements for their uses and to minimize the impact on the roads and the canyons that they're going to be located, that the rec resort would be located in. Those changes, we've worked back and forth with the staff has worked back and forth with the applicant and come up with language for those. They include additional definitions for seasonal parking and seasonal recreational uses. These are some minor changes to the existing ordinance, but then down below in section 3 is where all of the changes are included. They include a restriction on the amount of off-site parking to 40%, a total of 40%. So the rest of it would have to be maintained on site, that an engineered plan be produced to identify for the parking plan. In later, the seasonal parking be limited to one seasonal recreational use. And that use not exceed 150 days. Any shared parking agreement would have to be maintained for any use of other parking facilities. And that the facility or use be inform the patrons of the recreational resort where that off-site parking is located, transportation from those off-site locations to the use, that they receive approval verification from the whatever jurisdiction that off-site location is located, and that that transit be available to them to reduce the amount of parking required for those uses that they they are experiencing. This is something that's supported by staff. This is a reasonable request for a resort to have that. I think that the applicant can speak to the fact that there are many other resorts that have this option available, and it's just something that the county hasn't included in the past. So this is just to allow that flexibility for Sundance and recreational resorts. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Does this require a shuttle service?
Sorry?
Does this require a shuttle service to provide transportation from the off-site parking?
It requires them to provide some kind of transportation from the off-site parking locations to the resort, yes. And that would be found in E, at the method of transporting,
there it is.
transporting recreational resort patrons from, must be provided for all approved off-site locations.
Are there maximum distances these off-site parkings can be?
We discussed that. It's difficult to anticipate how far away those can be. We expect that most of those are reasonable because they're going to have to provide transportation to those locations. And we didn't want to necessarily restrict that at this point. But yes, we discussed that. And it didn't seem like it was necessary for this on staff's perspective, at least.
I don't think they're going to be busing anyone from Eagle Mountain.
Probably not.
And if they do, then Eagle Mountain will support them.
Well, given the challenges of development in an area like that, developing or finding off-site parking that's really close is probably limited. So we're looking
Right.
maybe off of the mountain a little bit.
Yeah, currently they've indicated they've been working with Orem and Provo to utilize parking facilities that are not utilized during the winter months as intensely. So they utilize areas of parking that generally don't get utilized in the time that they need it. So.
Sounds mutually beneficial.
And the applicant's here. If
I'd
you
love
wanna
to hear
from him.
from the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay, so the applicant would like to come to the microphone and state your name and where you're from.
Yeah, my name is Czar Johnson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Sundance Mountain Resort. And kudos to you guys for enduring such a long evening. I appreciate it. As always, I think Greg did a really good job articulating kind of what our needs are and what we're looking for as Utah County continues to grow and the popularity of Sundance continues to grow. We're looking for ways to be able to accommodate anyone that wants to participate up there. As you guys have all indicated, we're limited on land and development. Even with that, Over the last 3 years, we have been able to add about 350 additional parking spots, but we're kind of maxed out. For multiple years, we have been providing off-site parking. We have contracts with both Orem City and Provo City. Orem specifically with Palisade Park at the mouth of the canyon, the soccer fields there, as well as Timpanogos Park, where the Storytelling Festival takes place. And then with Orem, specifically Canyon Glen Park, which is the parking lot just kind of right south of, west of Bridal Veil Falls. UTA provides access from those, from the Palisade parking lot, as well as they have a bus stop at Harmon's and the mall. And then we provide complimentary what we call park and ride service from the other two lots for our guests. Any season pass holder, any day ticket guests can park at those lots. And on our peak days, not 7 days a week, but on our peak days, we offer complimentary service up to Sundance. And we have good utilization on that. The UTA on a peak day will average 300 guests up the mountain. Our park and ride on its busy day will do 250 to 260 guests up to the mountain from those parking lots. Those are contracted. We pay both Provo and Orem City for the use of those during the December through April 15th is the duration of those contracts currently. So
I appreciate that. You've cut my drive time for my kids from it's 12 minutes normally, but it's only 6 minutes if I drop them off at one of those. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And Bishop's Bowl was my bishop when.
Bishop Brent Beck.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he's my neighbor. He was my neighbor growing up.
An amazing family. Yeah. Great guy. So
it sounds like you're already doing this, and we're just updating code to make it.
Yeah, so we have a couple of projects one in progress right now. We're building an inn, and we're looking at adding an additional lift to our mountain. As we started conversations with the county on that project, it's 2 years out, but as we started conversations on that, one of the things they asked us to look at is a parking study. So it's really through the process of the parking study that formally it was identified that we're short a few parking spots to be able to meet our peak demand. And the parking study indicated that with our offsite parking that we currently have, we more than meet the demand. We have a surplus of parking when you include all those additional offsite spots. Because the county or the land use ordinance doesn't currently requires the lots to be adjacent and owned. We worked with the county to go through the process to hopefully get your guys' approval to amend that to allow for lots that aren't adjacent. So that's what we're here to do, and that's what triggered the request for this.
Who monitors those contracts to ensure that they always have those parking spots
that's actually
available?
built into this. We'll be required every year to submit to staff our agreements, and those agreements currently are annual. So we do meet with both Provo and Orem annually and negotiate those agreements. With this, now we're going to go to them and see if we can get some longer term agreements with them. But for sure, annually we'll submit to staff those agreements. They have those on record. And I don't remember what number, but I think it's incorporated in the proposed amendment language. So
I didn't think to ask a snowbird, but are you connected at all, or do you anticipate being connected to the Olympics and any impact from that?
yeah, I mean, we'll see. We won't host any events due to our size. Snowbird, I know for sure, is the same situation. These tight canyons, Big, Little Cottonwood, and North Fork Canyon, just can't accommodate the volume of traffic. But in 2002, when we hosted the Olympics, Sundance was a really popular spot for a lot of corporate groups that would bring guests in to participate and enjoy the Olympics. So we anticipate being involved in that way. And certainly as a ski resort in the state of Utah, we'll be proud and excited to be a part of that experience. So
Do you anticipate any additional changes to this ordinance in order to be able to accommodate that.
I don't, yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't know. Yeah. I mean,
Do we need to do more than here?
yeah, what happens a lot of times, well, what happened in 2002 is that our lodging product was really popular, but the ski mountain was quiet because people were out participating in the events and going to the events. People were staying at Sundance because of the beauty and what Sundance is. But the skier visits, the participation on the mountain actually reduces. It's the same effect that Park City gets during the film festival. Lodging gets filled up with guests that are off doing other things and not necessarily skiing. So I don't anticipate a need for that. And again, our offsite, our current parking plan shows that with the offsite parking that we do have, that we have just under 300 additional parking spots than what the peak demand shows that we need. So we do have a pretty decent buffer as long as we can maintain those three parking lots. So, and we're looking for other things. We're Fraser Park. You guys are probably familiar with that in the canyon. We're in conversations with that family to see if we can lease that land during the winter time. Puts the proximity, whoever asked that question, it puts the proximity much closer to Sundance and a lot more efficient for us. And that land kind of sits empty during the summer. So we're constantly and will continue to look for opportunities to provide additional parking, make access easier. It's in our best interest to make it as easy as possible for people to get to the resort and to limit the congestion in that canyon. So.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay.
When you're ready for a motion, I have a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have to have public comment.
hearing. Mhm. So we need a motion to open the public hearing.
So be it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is now open on this item. If anyone from the public
Come on, somebody
would like
come forward.
to come up, you've been here the
Somebody.
whole time. Okay, seeing none, I think we can move to a motion.
Let's maybe close the public hearing
Yeah, okay.
too, so.
Move to close the public hearing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is now closed.
There's no, you gonna make it?
Yeah, okay.
Is it your turn?
I move approval that the Utah County Planning Commission recommend approval to the Utah County Commission of the proposed amendments of the Utah County Land Ordinance, Section 4.60, to allow recreation resorts to utilize off-site parking locations to meet parking space requirements, along with any applicable renumbering or reformatting based on findings listed in Section 5 of the staff report.
Before we take a second on that, I did notice one typo on number 6. You have 3, then maybe 5, 6. There's a lonely T after parking. Okay. Just
With
saying.
grammatical corrections is my motion.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, yeah, we got to do roll call.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Is there any additional business from the county?
Thankfully, no.
Okay.
Thank you for
Then-
everyone's participation in making this happen tonight, so.
Yeah, and thank you to staff. As usual, thank you to Marie for putting together this massive packet with little divider things
Yeah.
and everything. That's a lot of work, so
Helpful.
thank you.
Do we do have, just while we got you here, we will have at least one item for April, so clear your calendars.
What is it you're saying?
We will have a meeting in April.
Okay.
So we do have some applications.
Are we adjourned? We need a
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Say aye, Chris.
Chris, we don't have a quorum.
Say aye.
I'm still here.
Say aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Good job. What's that?